Apologies. I am trying to fix this on my channel. Let me see if I deleted them. Okay, I'm live now, and I deleted the old ones. Shoot. Can I add my new scene? Nope. Why isn't the camera up? I don't understand. Sorry, guys. I'm frustrated. Why isn't my camera showing up? I guess this is going to be as good as we can do. And we're not going to have meltdowns tonight. We're just going to listen to Ashlie, and I'm going to rotate this so y'all can see it better. So let me fix that. Good streaming vibes for this one. I turned off my VPN. Closing Discord. Closing this. Closing this. I'm not sure why it's wobbling. I'm trying to stabilize it, and I need to... Sorry, Sky. I know this is ugly. I'm trying to get rid of bad yarn before I do my next thing. So I know it's ugly. I'm trying to rotate this right now. And I need to stabilize my desk at some point. Oh boy, really messy. I think it's just gonna have to be like this for right now, because I don't know how to fix it. I'm sorry. It's gonna be wobbly. God dang it. I need to get... I know. My desk is a whole moment. If you can't get it working, I'm down for just a craft and chat stream. I don't know. Maybe melt some of this darn snow. I'm happy to send my rage to anyone. I guess that's better. I won't be self-conscious because I'm on screen a little bit. I use bad yarn as a polyfill substitute. So I made this one before the stream. And this is the other, it's reversible, but it's a double, because this is bad yarn. It's just double-sided, but it's, when you double it up, it's not bad. But I did it a good way for tying it off, where you only have to attach here, and I'm gonna get a pom-pom for it. Oh, I'm sorry, Christina. I'm sorry she's back in the hospital. So, anyways, let me go get my other thing real quick. Well, no, I'll get it after we finish this. So I'm about halfway through on this one, so I thought I'd finish this up, and we need to get Ashlie Molstad on this stream. But the cool thing is, this is super, like, seem like a good flat top for an interchangeable pom-pom if you want, but it's only one stitch. Like, I'll explain it. How is that bad yarn? It's just the colors are bad, and meaning, like, I got it as a test for something. I don't, in terms of, like, it's not, it feels okay. It makes me a little gaggy when I touch it, so that's the problem. I have another soft one I'm making a sweater out of, but I don't like how big this color block's okay on this side, but this color block on this side isn't my favorite, and you've got a touch of the orange there. Oh, she's in acute heart failure? I'm sorry. Oh, that's awful, Christina. I would just call it ugly yarn. Yeah, we'll call it ugly yarn. In general, I was just getting like a $2 ball of yarn to try to keep practicing on this. So, that's where we're at on that. Let me pull up Ashlie Molstad. Unless y'all want to listen to something different. I downloaded all of her podcasts, so I'm happy to send it to you if you want, Christina. Although, I did it the men's size, so this is 60. It's new. It's fresh. And I just have to get a pom-pom for it. Or an interchangeable one. This is a little rough, so it needs a pom-pom on the top. But let me know if you want me to send it to you. Okay. Ashlie, where are you? Bad yarn for me would be when the thread disintegrates or something. My texture thing is very bad. So I got a bamboo mix of a yarn that's soft. This one's okay. It's soft for other people, I'm sure. Star Wars Minecraft? Shut up. That's amazing. Yeah, Christina just messaged me your address. I'll send it to you. I'm sorry we're wobbling. I need to figure this out. Is it incredible, Kira? Let me see. Zoom sneak in, story downloading, reaction videos, podcast, Ashlie Molstad. We've got 4, 5, and 6. I don't have. I think we did 1, 2, and 3. Or we can do something from Young Living. Controlling your reality. Ashlie, what are we doing, ma'am?
This is why it is so important that you can.
Oh, dear God. Need to put a little bit of her picture up on the screen. I'm about to go on and play it for the first time. It looks so awesome, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited for you. Kira, that sounds amazing. Get ready for some word salad from this. Episode 4, Controlling Your Reality. According to Ashlie Molstad. Let me add it to this. See, we're wobbling. That's because I'm in my freaking closet. I'm going to do my best. No. I gotta lock it. Lock. Lock. Okay. Add a new stream overlay. Sure. Screen share. Edit. Alright. I'm just trying to make this like do we really we don't I just want her to be on there a little bit, like what are we listening to? I don't want her to take up the screen. It's fine. I just glad my hubby told her no when she tried to get him to come get her while she was waiting in the ER talking about just come get me, I'm done waiting. She's been there all of 90 minutes. Oh. I'm sorry, Christina.
can see the distinction between the facts that are around you and the thoughts that you are making those facts mean, because it's the thought line that we have all the control over. And the thought line generates everything else. So we can't control what happens, right? We can't control what goes on in the world. We can't control how people treat us, but we can control how we react to it and what we tolerate and what boundaries we enforce and how we speak to ourselves. Well, welcome back to the InSource podcast. Today, I have something I'm really excited to share with you guys. It has probably been the one skill, I would say, that has changed my life the most. So you understand what insourcing is now, which is basically kind of learning to trust your own mind, own brain. And first, you've kind of got to learn how to even hear your voice, because most of us have muted our internal voices for so long. And then it is about sort of becoming a conscious observer of the things that voice in your head is saying. And then once you have that awareness and you have some separation between your thoughts and who you are, then we can make changes. And so today I want to lay out for you this tool that I've been using for several years now, but it really became my main tool in my toolbox that I go to. And it is what is called the model. So in, 2020?
I lowered her a little bit, sorry.
2020, I decided that I wanted to be certified.
I'm moving my lights, but for now,
the thing about life coaching is
this is too big for my desk.
Unregulated industry, so anybody can basically call themselves a life coach. But I knew that if I wanted to truly help people, I wanted to train with the best. So I went to the life coach school, and the life coach school was started and created by a woman named Brooke Castillo. She has a podcast called the Life Coach School Podcast. I highly recommend it. But she created and shared something that she calls the model. And the way that the model works is basically, it's sort of just a circle of everything in our life. Because if you can think of anything in your life right now, a lot of your thoughts about it, there's of course going to be some facts, but it's going to be mostly thoughts. And our brain, because we're not super clued into how our brains work.
Oh, you're good.
We're so used to thinking that
I have a hard time even listening to her, and I'm not trying to be mean. She's, and again, this is me saying, like, I have a very, like, monotone kind of lower. I don't know if that's, I don't know exactly, but I just have a hard time listening to her. And I don't know, calmer, like, just more pleasant things to listen to than Ashlie. Did I put my... Oh, yeah. There's my waste yarn at the bottom. Okay. There we go. It's telling you to buy more yarn. You love the loom sound, though? Okay. I'll leave that up. I have my AC running in the background, but I won't mute myself while she plays. We'll turn her down a smidge.
Our thoughts, instead of, like, I can promise you right now, you are not your thoughts. You are just the thinker of your thoughts. But we're not really ever taught that or shown that. And this model is what proves it. So I do hope to bring some episodes to you guys where it's live coaching. You'll kind of get to see how this works in action. But I'm going to lay it out for you now and try to give you a framework that you can start going maybe into your day and start recognizing thoughts as thoughts instead of as facts.
No.
Because
what did I do wrong? Testing. Crap. Testing. Oh, there we go. Okay, but we're back.
when you see them as thoughts, you realize that they are optional. And if you are thinking thoughts that are causing you pain and suffering that you don't, and they're optional, You could choose another thought that
Oh
can bring
my
you to a
God.
different state and is going to create a different
Ashlie!
result. So the way the model works is there is a circumstance, right? And the circumstance is something that can be proved in a court of law. It is things that 100% of people on the planet would agree with, right? So again, I mentioned in a previous episode, we wouldn't be able to say she was in a terribly abusive relationship. That wouldn't be a circumstance. That has some facts and emotions, and it's a little bit emotionally charged, right? And we wouldn't be able to prove to 100% of people on the planet. Not everyone would agree that that was true, right? Maybe even her abuser, that would be one person. They would probably not agree that she was in a terribly abusive relationship. So, and abuse is sort of a really charged one, so I'm sorry I keep going to that. But it was just the first sentence that came to mind. So we've got our circumstances, right? And then we have our thoughts about the circumstances.
Is that me?
So generally, to get to the thought, you will say a circumstance.
Hold on, I'm rewinding it.
And I will say, and what are you making that mean? Or what did you make?
That is her microphone. Can I just say this? Why didn't her sound person fix that? She's paying someone to edit her podcast. I mean, I mean, obviously I do mind. I just said something. I just don't know why. I don't know why she doesn't have a better produced podcast.
Make that mean. And generally, it's like usually what you made it mean about you. That is what we're going to get the thought from. So we might say, like I was listening to, I had a client today tell me that she got laid off. She's been laid off from her past 4 jobs. And she was feeling really defeated.
It's me?
And she thinks that the circumstance is I've been laid off, therefore I'm feeling defeated.
Okay, let me look.
The reality is she was laid off.
Let me look. Oh, I can't. Let me pull it up on my YouTube. Sorry, guys. I don't have my VPN on. Oh,
4
no.
jobs. And she was...
It looks fine on my end. But it might be buffering on y'all's end. I'm replaying it through YouTube right now. I'm scrubbing it. Okay. I'll try it again. I mean, sorry about that, guys.
Because of whatever reasons, right, that the company let her go. And her thought was, I'm not good enough. I can't get the job done, right? And so then she feels defeated. And it's the thought that is then triggering the feeling. And this is really important because we think that other people doing things to us is what is causing us to feel a certain way, but it's the thoughts that we're thinking about those things, about said circumstances, right? So you have your circumstances, which is the fact. Then you've got the thought that you are thinking about that fact, and that thought is going to cause a feeling in you.
What?
That feeling is the place that you're going to take action from. So if you're feeling defeated, you're probably not going to show up, right? Super confident, gung-ho, feel like, oh, no big deal. Like, I guess they lost out on me. I'm going to go find it, right? My value is here. I am strong. I'm an asset to any company. So you're probably not going to show up like that.
Okay.
You're probably going to maybe numb out a little bit. A lot of times when we have a really negative emotion, we go to eating for comfort, we drink, we scroll social, we'll online shop, we watch TV, we'll read a book, we go to bed. Like, we'll do all kinds of things in order to avoid escaping feeling that difficult emotion. And again,
to avoid escaping feeling that difficult emotion. To avoid feeling that difficult emotion? Why? Fine. We knew this was going to be bad. God.
We are the one that is causing that difficult emotion because of the thought that we're thinking, right? So you might think something like, I'm depressed because I saw my boyfriend. These are all client examples that I have. So I had someone that said, well, I'm feeling depressed because I saw my boyfriend post a story with his ex. Or I hate myself because I suck. Or I'm just exhausted because I am a workaholic. I can't stop working. I am insecure because I'm bigger than my sister. I saw my sister and she's smaller than me during the holidays, right? So I'm feeling insecure. I'm unattractive because I gained weight, right? So these are feelings that people are saying are a result of the circumstances, but there really is a result of the thought. So for example, I'm pressed because I saw my boyfriend with his ex. So when we actually pull that out and look at it, the fact is, the circumstance of that is that she saw her boyfriend with her ex, with his ex. So boyfriend posted story with ex-girlfriend, right? And her thought about that, what she made that mean is she is more important to him than I am. And then that made her feel anxious and depressed.
Hey, Jennifer.
So it was the thought that made her feel like that, right? I can tell you if I saw John on his stories with his ex, I would not feel, that would not be my thought, right? I'd be like, oh, interesting. I wonder if they just ran into it, right? I might be curious. I'd ask him about it later or something, right? But I'm not going into anxious. And when she's anxious, then she said, I took all the blame, all the worry. I cried. I called my mom. I stayed home. I was supposed to meet him out. And I said, no, he doesn't want me there, right? And so then the result is she's creating this misery where she's not even going out there and spending time with her boyfriend. And she has this thought that the ex is more important than her. And that is what she's, in that evening, that is what the result was, right? She made her ex more important because she didn't want to be present because of the feeling that was caused by the thought, not by the circumstance.
I mean, what is this? I mean, I understand part of what she's saying, but like, there are some circumstances that you can't just think it away. You can't just think it like differently. I know. My whole setup is odd because I don't have a big desk in my closet, and so I need to move my microphone. I've already moved my soundboard and my computer, and I'm putting my lights on my wall instead of having them on my desk to try to free up some room, but I have 8 more rows to go. There's a little counter right here. There's like a tensioner you can get where you can just stick it on here and it like tensions your yarn for you, but I'm just holding it down because I don't have that.
I have another one where during the holidays, this client of mine got together with her family and
Are you allowed to be sharing client stories on a podcast when you're a life coach? Is there any kind of credentials or like not credentials? Are there any kind of requirements that life coaches have for like freaking maintaining someone's privacy? Because this sounds awful. The Young Living New Year's kickoff. When is that, Kira? Hello. I've been out of the loop. I've been out of the loom. Just kidding. I've been out of the loop with stuff. I don't know. Oh, Kira. The girl I signed up with, she's selling her line to her upline's husband and leaving Young Living. And I think she's going to a new company. And word on the street is that the Holy Spirit told her to leave Young Living. 15, 16. Saturday? Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. I want to watch it. Yeah, this one, it's a German one. They have all different kind. Like there's Centro has one. This is an Addi. There's a ton of brands. They're just called knitting something. Knitting something. I don't remember. Knitting machine. I'm just finishing this before I put Ashlie back on because I won't be able to focus. Okay, we have 1 row left. Okay. So this is 120 rows. All right, I'm going to put her back on, but basically this is the best way. And I haven't seen anyone fasten off their hats like this, but they basically will take this off, then will take this off, then they will cinch this side, then they'll cinch this side, then put them together, and it's like this. The lazy way that I have found is the best way I found to do it. Okay.
A story about herself and her size, and that everyone's judging her, and she's probably, she's judging herself and all of this and that. And then we said, okay, what's the facts? The fact is, sister weighs 120 pounds. My thought about that is, okay, so her thought then is, she looks better than me. Then she feels inadequate. So she's at this holiday gathering feeling inadequate, not because her sister weighs 120 pounds, which is factually, we can agree on that, right? We could have a sister step on a scale. Everyone on the planet would say, yep, that's what she weighs. But it's the thought that is making her feel inadequate. The inadequacy is what is making her drink a lot, overeat, tune out, become defensive, have a shorter fuse, cut the night short. And then the result is, when she's thinking that her sister looks better than her sister is like living better than her because she's showing up from this inadequate place. So that's the other thing that's really important is we've got
her sister is living better than her. Oh, Ashlie. Hello, Beth. You'd be proud of me, Beth. I doxed myself and have already deleted that live. Ask has the manual ones where he sits with the hook. Oh, cool. I have no idea how to do any of this. I just saw one on YouTube and I was like, oh my God, that looks so relaxing. And it is. And I'm making a sweater now and a blanket and I made hats big enough for my huge head I have. That's cool that he likes to knit. So this is waste yarn, and I've just been reusing it for every project. And I don't know why, but I do know you can drop stitches, and it's the worst thing in the world. And the waste yarn helps get all the funkiness out or something, and it makes it easy to see which stitch to pick up to attach it. And then I remove this. What did I do? Well, it's a long story. My camera wasn't working on my phone, but my Mac is my, DC name, but then it didn't put my DC name up. It was bad.
Our circumstances, the facts of the world. We've got then our thoughts that we think about those circumstances. Those thoughts generate our feelings. We take action from that feeling, and those actions will produce a result that generally will reinforce the thought. Okay?
Trying to make it closer for y'all.
Another example is I'm unattractive because I've gained weight, right? So I said, okay, what are the facts of this?
You've contributed to it through Beachbody.
Okay, we could agree. We can all agree on that, right? That is math. That is just facts. So we put that in the circumstance line. I gained 14 pounds. Her thought is, I'm unattractive. That makes her feel angry. So then when she's angry, showing up from an angry place because of what she's thinking, not because of her size, she gets grouchy. She takes it out on her fiance. She retreats from him. She eats. She orders pasta and eats it in bed. She leaves and goes to the cabin for the weekend so that she doesn't have to be around anyone who could see her, right? And then the result is she's feeling not even just physically unattractive, but emotionally unattractive. She is becoming unattractive to the people around her because she's not showing up as her best self.
What?
And this is why it is so important that you can see the distinction between the facts that are around you and the
I don't know.
After you are making those facts mean, because it's the thought line that we have all the control over. And the thought line generates everything else. So we can't control what
you have
happens,
21
right?
pins in your test bunny plushie, poor thing.
We can't control how people treat us.
I don't think Ashlie Molstad gets it. And she's always talking in terms of attractive or unattractive. And it's like, additionally, you've contributed to it's your body image or bust. And you better look great or not. Or else, because you've been a Beachbody coach for a million years. I hope I didn't skip a stitch. I feel like I did. Sorry, I'll press play in a second. Hello, Karina. I hope you get some good sleep.
But we can control how we react to it and what we tolerate and what boundaries we enforce and how we speak to ourselves, right? So when we try to change the circumstance, so this happens a lot where we think that we're feeling upset because we look a certain way. And so we think, well, if I just change the way I look, I'm going to feel totally different. But that skips the T line. That skips the thought line. And so you can then, a lot of you have probably experienced this, where you've been in a smaller body than you are now, and you were still just as insecure, right? Or you've set a goal to lose 10 pounds, you lose 10 pounds, and you still don't feel like it's enough because it was never about the body. It was the way that you were thinking about the body. And this is true in all circumstances. So when we try to change the circumstance, we still can be left feeling the same because that feeling is generated from the thought, not the circumstance, right? Okay, so for me, for example,
I think
some
she's
of the
an
thoughts
idiot.
that I've had over the course of my life, like when I very first started this business where I wanted to, put my life out sort of for public consumption, I had a thought, I'm basically a piece of shit. Who the hell am I going to inspire? But there was a little piece of me, a little part of me that thought, maybe I can just keep showing up, right? So instead of living in the thought, who the hell am I going to inspire? And then feeling like, how does that feel in my body? If I think the thought, I'm not going to inspire anybody, it feels defeating.
Thank you,
right?
Lynn.
So that thought's going to make me feel defeated. But if
So then this is waist yarn. So it's all attached now. So you just kind of go slowly and you're going to just do you're going to secure these stitches or whatever they're called. I think one side is knit, the other side is purl. Apologies. I'm not saying this is a tutorial because it's not, but. And then when I get around to the other side, I think I did 4. I'm going to do another one. All right, so that's my black needle. And then I just get enough to stitch. And my needle's somewhere. Is it on the floor? I was doing so well. Where's my needle? Let me just play it while I look for my needle. DC.
I can then move it. I can spend a little bit more time in the thought. Maybe I can just keep showing up. That makes me feel more committed, right? And the action that I'm going to take from defeated versus committed are very different, which are then going to produce very different results. And I'm still the same me no matter what. It's just what thought am I practicing more, right? So then I start showing up. I do start showing up. And people start saying nice things and saying, thank you for changing my life and all these things, right? So I had this thought, wait, maybe I am inspiring. And then it became what I have to say matters. I can make a difference, right? And then that thought, once I
can't
believed
hear
that
anything.
thought, it became, I was meant to do great things. So we have these thoughts, right? Because you can't go from, I hate my body,
Testing.
to I love my body, because that doesn't feel believable. Or I think I'm disgusting, to I feel beautiful, or I'm very attractive, or whatever it is, right? I know I'm focusing a lot on the body right now, but this applies to anything in your life. You're not going to be able to make that huge leap overnight, because it's going to cause cognitive dissonance in your brain, meaning you're going to be holding two beliefs and they're not going to go together. And the one that you've been practicing more is going to generally win out. So the one, that you've been practicing of I'm ugly and unattractive and a piece of crap is going to generally win out because you have more proof of that. You have set your brain on the mission to go find evidence of all of that for years, and it's found it. And we don't have to look very far to decide that we are not very worthy when we are bigger, because society hammers us over the head
the first one booted me
right?
off because of the VPN.
On every corner of the internet.
The second one I doxed myself. The third one, we're here. Testing. There we go. Okay.
Even at your family's dinner table, people are talking about their diets and the way they look and blah, 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 all of these things, right? So you don't have to go very far to find evidence that a smaller body is a better body. It doesn't make it true. It's just your brain doesn't like ambiguity. So when you tell it to go find evidence for a thought to prove it true, it can then say, got it. Okay, check. We believe that. We can take it from our conscious brain that really has to think about things and move it into our subconscious brain, into our primal brain, and then free up our brain space to do other things, right? And so that is what has happened with a lot of your internal dialogue and your internal belief system is at some point, it was a question. At some point, you started observing the world, right? So if we go with the body example, you start observing the world when you're little and you see your mom on a diet and your grandma on a diet, or your mom commenting on you have to eat healthy food and, we need to look a certain way, right? And then you see men commenting on other women's body. And then you see at the checkout line when you're sitting in the shopping cart, you see women's bodies are on the cover of all these magazines. And so your little brain starts seeing, okay, women's body, it's very important that they look a certain way and they are here to be commented on and consumed, and that is their value, right? So you're a little girl and you start observing that, and your brain then goes out into the world and it starts scanning for evidence that this is true, and you find a ton of it. So then that becomes a belief. But I can guarantee you right now, if you are a mom or you know any little girls, that is not a thought that they were born with. And it is not a thought that you were born with either. It is just one that's presented itself to you when you were younger. And then your brain started scanning for evidence. It found the evidence, and right. And so it's in the conscious part of your brain as you're starting to build this new belief. It's in the conscious part of your brain. Your brain has to work really hard when it's learning new things. And the primal brain is motivated by three things. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot, but the motivational triad is to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and exert as minimal energy as possible. Wants to conserve its energy, right? That has kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, whatever, however long humans have been around. But we have now evolved to have that prefrontal cortex, that highest part of our human brain, that really, that is where we learn things. That's where we think about the future. That's our processing brain. But it requires a lot more energy. So if you can think about the first time, you started driving, when you got your driver's license, you were using your prefrontal cortex. You're learning a new skill. You're getting out there and you're terrified and you're trying to remember the turn signal and how to check your mirrors when you're merging lanes. And, I remember the first time I got on the highway, we were in a convertible and I'm getting on the on-ramp, and I'm coming up at the same time as a semi is coming on, right, the lane that I'm supposed to merge into. And I didn't know what to do. I'm trying to do it. I got my signal on and I'm looking at my mirrors and I'm trying to accelerate at the right speed, but I'm very overwhelmed and it was very hard. And I didn't do it right. All I remember is that guy honking his horn and I'm in the convertible and I'm terrified. And I end up having to pull to the side of the road, right? And now I just get on the highway, handing a freaking juice box to my kids in the back seat, singing songs because it is now in my subconscious part of my brain and in my primal part of my brain how to drive. This is true with all of the things that we have learned. So even the thoughts and the beliefs that you have about yourself, at some point, we're not just innately believe. Like, you were not born believing all of this crap about yourself. We just set our brain out on the without, knowing that we are doing this. And it's very efficient. It has to do this so that it can free up your prefrontal cortex to be observing the world and taking in new things and constantly learning and all of that, right? So it's really important that you understand that your thinking is not fact. And I'm hammering this home because it shows you how much power you really have when you can recognize that so much of your life truly is dictated by your...
Some of the stuff she's saying isn't, I don't think, necessarily incorrect. Some of the stuff she's saying is just way off. I'm just removing this real quick. Oh, this yarn. I don't know nothing about knitting other than when you first start out, you got to pull this stuff. You got to pull this yarn out. And because we've connected this to this, it's not going to unravel. But this one, I don't like to waste it. So I like to use it as much as I can. Except here, we've got a little bit of a cluster. Okay, there we go. And then when you pull this first stitch out, you can just pull it straight out of the whole thing. And it is a little more time consuming, but then it'll just all unravel. This waste yarn will unravel. Let me press play on Ashlie. What a time for me to focus back on the live.
Your brain and not on the things going on around you and the people that are surrounding you, you have so much more power to change your present and the life that you're living. But this is not easy, okay? It is not easy to do this because, one, we're not trained ever to do this. So this is a new skill. You're using your prefrontal cortex right now, and it requires a lot more energy from your brain to grow and learn and lean into these new beliefs that maybe, just maybe, you have a lot more power than you ever knew. And the easier thing, and what your primal brain is going to have you do, is just continue believing whatever it is that you believed, right? And it's way easier to say, I'm unhappy because of the way that my boss treats me. I hate my job because of my boss. It's way easier to say that the problem is out there, right?
Sometimes it is out there, Ashlie.
Circumstance line, maybe you had a horrible day at work and your brain might be saying, oh my God, my boss yelled at me in front of the whole room today.
Which is shitty.
I'm ashamed or I'm embarrassed or I'm angry or whatever it is, right? But if I were coaching you one-on-one, I'd say, okay, and what did you make that mean? Your boss yelling at you in front of the whole room. If you make that mean,
no way.
am terrible. Now everyone knows that I suck and I'm not good at my job or whatever.
No way.
But of course, you're going to feel ashamed. And it's very difficult for your brain to feel shame. That's one of the more painful emotions. So it's going to instead, I sort of think of emotions on a spectrum, right? So you've got maybe like euphoria at the top. If we look at like maybe a thermometer, I don't know the visual, but like a spectrum up and down. And you've got like bliss, euphoria, joy at the top, and then you've got like shame and inadequacy, embarrassment.
So then it just comes undone.
Those ones are lower, but then like anger, while it's not a fun thing to feel, is less painful than shame.
Microphone.
So your brain is going to go to anger because it's easier to feel, and then also it's like the problem is my boss, not my self-esteem and what I made them yelling at me mean about myself.
See, now
that I'm a piece of shit, that I'm not valued, and now everybody knows it.
You've got
you
this
have this
now.
internal voice that isn't always kind to you, and then you get called out in public, and you think, oh, now everyone's going to know that what my brain says to me about me is true. Whereas if I was somewhere
Corinthians,
and someone yelled at, like, let's say I was at a board meeting and someone yelled at me. Back when I had no confidence, I would have gone right to that. I would have probably felt immensely embarrassed and ashamed and then probably gone.
Anyway, it's not that we're learning how to do this. But this way, these are already stitched together. Like they're already attached. And then before we do that though, I just tie this one off a little bit. I don't know if that's the right thing to do because, like, I'm literally China bull bull in a China shop my way through this. But, dang it. Anyways, I'm not doing this correctly. I'm just trying to tie this off. And then I'm just trying to feed it. I just feed it down through here. And I'll take care of it when I do this. But then, because we already did the way we did the stitch at the top, this is ready to be pulled. And because we added a few extra rows, it sits very flat. So you don't have this weird bulk. Anyways. You don't have the weird bulk at the top of your beanie, but it's still double. So it's warm. And I was doing just a brim because it's hot here in Texas. So I was doing like a double brim. And then this was a single, but this yarn's too thin for that. But anyways, I'll keep playing.
Gone to anger and been like, that is absolutely unacceptable. Whereas now if someone yelled at me, I would be like, this is inappropriate and what's going on with
Jennifer.
them? Like, I know I am a valuable asset. That was not called for, right? So I think I would maybe go into curiosity. Like, what's up with that dude or chick that she's doing that to me? I think initially my brain would be triggered into shame. But because I have this skill, I now know that is an optional place to go. There's another thought I can think that's going to serve me better, that's going to help me show up as the person I want to be, and I'm going to do that work. But this is hard because it means you are taking accountability for your life, which means you have to do the work. And it is so much easier to just say the problem's out there. I have another example. There was something that happened a couple months ago where a bunch of my friends had gotten together on a vacation and I was not invited and I felt rejected. And instead of feeling rejected, my brain said, that is so rude of them. How could they not think of me, right? And so it kind of went to anger, and I let them know I feel very hurt and this was really hurtful. And it's very easy in that situation to be like, that was really rude of them, right? They are the problem. The problem is out there. But I know that doesn't give me any peace. That gives away all of my power, and it keeps my internal vibes in someone else's hands. And so then I can look at it and I can say, is that really true? They did what they did, and that is totally fine. They are allowed to do what they're doing. What am I making it mean? And what I made it mean was basically that no one likes me. And then I started feeling rejected, and that was very painful. And then I could say, is that true? Is it true that no one likes me? No. That's not a thought I want to think. And I'm guessing this is an oversight. And actually, it made total sense that they didn't invite me to this thing because I hadn't really been talking to them. I hadn't been that great of a friend to them for the previous 6 months, and they'd been getting closer. This actually makes sense. So in the end, I was able to let go of any anger towards them and any sadness and shame for myself or rejection for myself. Rejection is another very difficult emotion to feel, and move into peace and understanding and compassion for myself. And
good point,
absolute, Beth. Not even forgiveness, just like, oh, okay, I hope they have a good time for them, right? So it is harder to do this, but it is going to bring you so much more peace. And I want you to think about something that's maybe been a story that you've been telling yourself that has been causing you to not feel peace for a long time. And I want you to look and analyze that story. Look at and analyze that story and really like get clear and honest with yourself of how much of it is fact and how much of it is my thoughts, right? So a lot of you know that I have struggled with my mom for years. And I ended up several years ago cutting her out of my life and sort of drawing a line that said, I'm not going to be able to communicate with you anymore. I'm not going to be able to have you in my life and have these boundaries up. And whenever I tell anybody the story, they say, oh my God, that sounds awful. I am so sorry that happened to you, right? But all they're doing is validating that I can stay in suffering. All that
What?
we're doing by saying that this shouldn't have happened to us, it should have been different, is we're staying in suffering. And when someone comes to us with a really painful story and we say, oh my gosh, I would feel the same way. How awful. That's horrific, right? All we do is validate that they should be in pain. And that
What
doesn't
the hell
ever
is
pull
she
them out of
talking
pain. And I'm not
about?
saying as a friend, if someone comes to you with a heartbreaking story, that you should coach them or like tell them, well, there's another way you could look at this. Like, that's not going to be helpful. Definitely come at them with empathy and definitely say, I totally get it. That's really hard. That would be really hard for me. Blah, all the things. I'm saying do this to yourself. Free yourself from that pain. And so then I started, and this was very, very hard for me because I had a lot of anger towards my mom for years. I was like at the height of my life where I felt like just happiness and joy was oozing out of every pore, except for when I would think about my mom. And when I would think about my mom, it would feel like my blood was boiling. I felt hot. I felt angry. I felt mad. I felt resentful. And my sisters felt differently. They didn't want to not have my mom in their life. And so all the same circumstances happened to them.
Anyway, so that's
but
it.
Their thought was totally different than mine. My thought was,
So,
she should have protected us. I should have
kind
had a
of-
better mom. She should have treated us better. And their thought was, I'm going to take mom.
I know, we're talking about heavy shit in the other side. Anyways, but it's two-sided. And we've already tied this off at the top. And then, again, this isn't the best resolution. It's not truly double-sided. But I have this detachable pom-pom that you tied around a button, so you can either have the pom-pom on either side. What am I doing with my life? I don't know. Anyways. But I think it looks good from both sides. For what it is, since I don't like the yarn. It's very soft for, I think, general people. It feels squishy and soft. I don't know. Let me go get my stuff so I can show Lynn my sweater. I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Okay, am I back? All right. So, this is Caspian's hair, but I'm doing these on a 22 pin machine, and this is bamboo and something else. Anyways, so I'm doing these. It's not great because I ordered the yarn before I knew how to do stuff on my little loom, and so the yarn's very tiny, if that makes sense. And so I'm doing a 22 pin circular thing, and then I'm doing a mattress stitch to stitch them together. So, sorry, Caspian's hair is just out of control, but it's okay. This is the right side, I think. Which is the right side? This is the right side? I don't remember. I think this is the right side. So it was just like a grouping of colors, so I'm making a sweater. And it's very soft. So, and I've never I don't know, I think it looks pretty good for my first, not that you need skill to use the circular knitting machine, but I've never knit any. See, this is a little bit of a mess up right there. But I think this is the wrong side. God. I need to lint roll it because Caspian got on it. But I'm just doing a pattern to use through the yarn to practice, but also I thought it was going to be bigger, like a bigger weight. So, but it's because it's so small, like such a small weight, it works fine if you double it up for yeah, I really like this color. And I'm just trying to use through the yarn because it wasn't, oh, I did something funny there. Oh well. Womp womp. Skipped a stitch. That's okay. It's my first sweater I'm making. So, but I'm going to make a panel to show. Well, I'm just going to make a panel right now because I can't sleep. I got these for Christmas, so. Hey, Sherry. I was watching the sermon on 8. It's awful. I'll turn it back on in a second. I'm just trying to start this. Dang it. Press play, DC.
Any way I can, you know? So again, same circumstance, very different result for all of us because of the thought that we were thinking. And so when I started realizing this stuff happened in my past, and there is no such thing as past trauma. There's no such thing as past trauma. There is trauma that happens to you when it happens, and if those things that happened way back then are causing you pain right now, today, it is actually caused by your brain. It's not caused by that thing that happened.
Oh, what a liar. You're a freaking liar.
And this is so hard because we want to be angry at it. It shouldn't have happened to us. But I knew
Are you fucking kidding me?
To bring peace to myself. And I knew I didn't want to feel this way anymore. And I couldn't go back and change the past. So I had to do the work on changing the way I thought about it.
I don't know what's wrong with my yarn. Hold on.
It is so hard, and it is so freeing and worthwhile. So I want you to think about maybe a story that you're telling yourself that is causing you a lot of pain, and you're not going to be able to get there today. Today, I just want to bring you to the place of awareness where you see that it's possible that maybe that thought could be something different that is going to create a different result for you, right? That's all we're doing today. We are not moving
Molstad.
into creating that different result. I just want to bring awareness. The very first
no
step
worries.
of changing.
She just... To say that trauma is all in your head is just patently false. I don't think she understands enough to be able to be speaking on this. And she's twisting a hell of a lot of shit. I'm just reusing my junk thread. My junk yarn. Sorry, we're center now. Trying to. There we go. There's clamps for this, but I don't have them for. There's clamps that hold it down, but I have my keyboard right here, so I'm just trying to figure it out as I go. It is so dangerous of her to say. And she's not a freaking therapist. I'm eating Ukrainian chocolates that my Russian friend gave me. That's incredible. It sounds delicious.
Any thought is having the awareness that it is a thought and not a fact.
Hi, Fizzle
right?
Sticks.
Because if you would have asked me 4 years ago if it was a fact that my mom should have been different,
Trying to figure out the
I would
router.
have said yes. Because how dare she do that? And now I've moved, as I've done this work, I've moved from, anger towards her to absolute love and compassion. So much so that part of me doesn't want to tell the story publicly because
I wasn't paying attention.
I know it's hard for her to hear. But the other part of me is like, these are my truths. This is my reality. This is stuff that really happened. And I love you. I have so much forgiveness. And I've moved into a place of, man, that must have been so hard for her to make that decision, for her to choose anybody over her kids back then, even though it was her spouse. It must have been so hard to choose that, because I cannot imagine doing that to my kids today, right? And so I have so much passion, and I just think she was doing the best she could. And I genuinely believe every human is doing the best they can. Yes, even the abusers. Yes, even the people that are blowing up the Reddit blogs and saying awful, horrific things about other humans and are going into people at their lowest moments and then just dragging them through the mud. Like, yes, even them, they are doing the best they can. Doesn't mean that we have to tolerate it, right? Now, I'm not saying, hear me very clearly. I'm not saying people get to treat you however and you just deal with it. It's up to you to be happy. No. But
this is,
it is very
I just need a different thread. God dang it.
I am responsible for how I feel.
Sometimes I use these too long and it's not
for
good.
How I feel, then I can change the result of the life that I'm living, because I can work on the thought to think a different thought that is going to serve me better, which is going to create a different result in my life. And maybe that result is I have a boundary that does not allow that person in my life, right? So I forgave my mom and I had all this empathy and compassion for her probably for about a year before I ever opened it, maybe even longer, a year and a half, 18 months before I ever opened the door again. I forgave her for me, because there was this other thought of like, I need to hold her accountable. But me holding her accountable was actually only keeping me in pain, and I was not holding her. When I was suffering and in pain, I was thinking about her. It wasn't affecting her. She was going about her life. She didn't know.
This is normally not this hard.
I'm
just new at this.
She didn't know. I'm sitting here at this moment,
and Ashley's making me crazy.
Out of my ears, and she is having lunch with her friends. It's not affecting her. Yet I am suffering, and that is where I realize when because she wants her stuff to affect other people. Not about that person. It's for yourself, right? It's really a gift for yourself, and that is where it became so clear to me. And now I actually have so much gratitude for the choices that my mom made, because I know that it led me to be the person that I am. And
oh my God, Ashlie.
I needed to go through all of that, and I appreciate all of that. As painful as it was, it built my resiliency and my strength and all of those things, right? But this is the spectrum, and that's not where we're going to get today. I just want to show you today what's possible just by changing your brain, and more than that,
forget it,
that it is possible. Right? I just want to show you that. And so sometimes if you're thinking about a story and maybe your story has to do with your body and it doesn't involve anybody else, but it has more to do with just your opinions of yourself, there's a couple tricks that help to create some separation between,
I don't know why this thread's doing this.
Like thinking your thoughts and the fact that you are your thoughts, right? Okay, so instead of saying, I am fat and gross, try just adding I am thinking to these statements. So I am fat and gross. I'm fat and gross too. No, I am thinking I am fat and gross. Small change, but it makes a big difference. Maybe you are a people pleaser. So you might say, I just can never say no. I want you to tell yourself, right?
I don't think it's necessarily bad advice.
You really don't want to do it, but you don't want to disappoint them less. So you say yes. But I want you to
I'm being a cheapskate right now. So
I am thinking I can't say no. Not I can't say no. Not I can never say no. I am thinking I can never say no. Right?
I've used the thread
people
too
don't
much.
Like me. I am thinking I am too much. I am thinking people don't like me. I am thinking I embarrass myself. So adding that in creates a little separation. It's very helpful. Another way that you can do that is saying something like, the story my brain is offering me, or the story I'm making up right now. Right? just to create some space between you and your thoughts, because that is the number one step. And then once you realize that your thoughts aren't you, and you can feel like you have more ownership over them, and then be more open to changing them. And the temptation when you understand this skill is then to speed it up, right? Okay, now I realize that my thoughts are causing me to be in pain. So how do I stop thinking these painful thoughts and just only think good ones anymore? And that's not the way it works either. What I want to show you really is just how much power you have. And then I also want to build up your stamina for experiencing difficult emotions. We are in such a rush to only feel positive all the time, but because life is not always positive all the time, when we have a negative emotion, when we feel something difficult and uncomfortable, our brain, our primal brain says, remember, avoid pain, seek pleasure, avoid pain. So go eat, go drink, go shop, go do these things, right? And then it does like a net negative, because then you add on this thing that doesn't feel good on top of your already not good feeling emotion. And then you got to deal with the repercussions of all of that. And so my goal is not to get you to feeling great all of the time. My goal is to get you to have confidence that you can feel the hard things, right? So if you are living some challenging thoughts and stories.
Thanks, Mother Dearest, for making me have irrational reactions to loud noises, arguing, and for massive issues with confrontations. Yes, mind your head, fizzle sticks. And I don't know if we should give up listening to this podcast, but the fact that people think that this is incredible stuff, I don't understand it. And she's twisty enough that, like, sorry. I don't know what's going on. We're off kilter. Okay. I guess it would be better if I could go lower for y'all. Okay. What? Okay. But she is coming awfully close, and maybe she crossed that line into saying you can create your own reality, and the bad things that have happened to you didn't actually happen to you. It's how you responded to them. And I'm not a therapist. I don't think that's right. I think part of what she's saying, like, plays around with being correct, and it's mostly all wrong. I'm really missing my dad because it's coming up on 30 years that he's been gone. I'm sorry, Sherry. My husband's mom passed away in 2018, and it's been some of the hardest stuff to work through. And she wasn't my mom, but I loved her a lot. And I'm sorry that losing parents, it's hard. I have one of his flannel shirts, and I might put it in a flannel quilt I'm gonna make for myself. That's a really good idea, Sherry. I'm planning a trip to the mothership next week. My disabled dad got the vid, and after hospitalization, he got early onset dementia. He doesn't really know who I am, and it's so hard. I'm sorry, Beth. It's awful, really. It's put a lot of pressure on my sister, mom, and I, who have odd relationships. I'm sorry you have to go through that, Beth. Oh God, I think I closed. There it is. Okay.
Emotions and situations right now, you're not doing it wrong. That's being a human. And I want you to see that
Oh,
when you're
good.
in
It's
pain,
at the
it
end
doesn't
of the
mean you're doing it wrong.
podcast.
It means that you're just a human, and experiencing that and allowing it and being present with it and recognizing that it is your thoughts, that is how you're going to do this. Right?
Oh, we're good. We reset it. Okay.
All right. I will see you guys next week.
We're not listening to anyone tonight. That's for damn sure. It's like we know we're going to lose them one day, but we're never really prepared. Yep. Spent a lot of time in my life trying to prepare, but I just can't imagine how it'll be. For sure. Not me pulling a Lynn and writing YouTube chat messages in Teams to my coworkers. Glad we can be here for you, Beth and Sherry and everybody. Lynn, did you get to see my sweater I'm making? Maybe you did. I'm knitting it on my little guy right here. So I'm doing a mattress stitch to put all the panels together. All right, we gotta listen to something else that's not awful. Yeah, it's not meant to be striped. But I have to use through the yarn because it's way smaller than I thought it was. It's like way thinner than I thought it was gonna be because I was inexperienced in buying yarn. So I have to make it stripy. YouTube. Let's see. I don't know. I guess since we're doing body. Oh my gosh, it's all the Snark Cruise videos on Ashlie Molstad. Oh my god. I don't think we need to listen to Ashlie anymore. I don't even know what's pleasant to listen to. We'll just put some music up, I guess. Browse. Themes. Cozy winter. Sure. I don't want to piss people off if they don't like music. Cinematic score. No. See, I don't know if I can play Lo-fi either because I don't know if I'm... Oh, okay. Oh, maybe it works. Maybe I can do it on Epidemic Sound. If this is awful, I'll turn it off. I don't know if you can hear it. I have nothing else to play. Chris Shelton on Scientology. Oh, let's do that. Chris Shelton on Scientology. YouTube.
Hi, I'm Chris Shelton. I'm a writer.
Okay. What is wrong with Scientology? Oh, that's from 8 years ago. Let me see. Is that what y'all are saying, Chris Shelton? I vote not Jesse Lee Ward. We're not doing Jesse Lee Ward. Oh, Tony Ortega. Let's see. Let me see if he has playlists. I'm on Chris Shelton right now. My Life and Escape from Scientology. Oh, wow. This is from 3 years ago. Oh, this was on Mormon Stories? Interesting. Okay, let's play this. Let me add it to the stream. Sorry, my computer's shaking. This okay, guys? Episode 1195. My life as a Scientologist and as an ex-Scientologist activist, Chris Shelton. Recorded 10/21/2019, part 1. Let me lock this. mormonstories@gmail.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is October 21st, 2019, and we are so thrilled to be holding our concluding episode for now with ex-Scientologist and YouTuber and author and blogger Chris Shelton. For those of you who have not been following our latest Mormon Stories podcast episodes, we recently did 2 lengthy sit-downs with Chris Shelton. The first sit-down did 3.5 hours on L. Ron Hubbard and the rise of Scientology, paying explicit attention to the parallels between L. Ron Hubbard's life and Joseph Smith's life and the beginnings of Scientology and the beginnings of Mormonism. My listeners have really enjoyed pondering and thinking about those parallels. They also enjoyed the in-depth coverage that we were willing to give to any topic. Nowadays, oftentimes podcasts are highly produced, super short, and that's a great format. But here on Mormon Stories, our mode is to go long form and to really go in depth. And we appreciate those who support that approach. So that was the first series that we did with Chris Shelton. The second series that we did with Chris Shelton was on David Miscavige and the rise of modern Scientology, and kind of comparing that to the rise of modern Mormonism from Brigham Young until the present. And again, we found lots of cool parallels. This series follows several other interviews that we've done with other cult members or cult, explorations of religions or unhealthy religions, from Tara Westover and her book Educated, to Tova Mirvis and her life as an ex-Orthodox Jew and her book, The Book of Separation, to, what else? Oh, also, of course, Amber Scora as an ex-Jehovah's Witness and her book Leaving the Witness. We have really enjoyed covering other cults or unhealthy religions, and we look forward to doing more of those in the weeks and months ahead. And of course, our interview with Steve Hassan was really important, where we talked about the bite model the ways
Oh.
that unhealthy organizations and or cults use behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, thought control and emotions. And if I want to say that more accurately, limits on behavior, limits on information, limits on your thoughts, and emotionally manipulative tactics, either fear or guilt or shame on the one hand, or, you know, huge promises of things like being together forever with your family, joy, flow, choirs, emotion, to hook you. Anyway, interviewing Stephen Hassan on the Bite model was super important. And so that's where we are. And we're going to be interviewing Chris Shelton today to complete this series, talking specifically about his life as a Scientologist. Before we do that, I just want to make a really quick plug. For those of you who don't know, the Open Stories Foundation of Mormon Stories is a proud sponsor of Thrive. Thrive is you can think of it as a general conference for post-Mormons, but basically it's an event that we're holding November 17th in Salt Lake City as a way to promote healing and growth and community for post-Mormons. And so we're bringing Wayne Sermon from Imagine Dragons, I believe, along with his wife, Alex, to Salt Lake City. We're bringing Amber Scora, author of Leaving the Witness, to Salt Lake City. And then we're going to have a bunch of phenomenal speakers, including Christian Moore, Natasha Alford Parker, Stephanie Sorensen Larson. The list is super long, but we're going to have just a day celebrating post-Mormonism, focused on positive things, healing and growth. And we're just going to try and get as many post-Mormons together to show that we're out, to show that we're proud, to show that we're healing and growing and moving on, and to make friendships and to build community, and frankly, to help figure out what's next. So the Open Stories Foundation has signed up to be a sponsor of Thrive. Thrive is being run under a for-profit only for the sake of expediency, but just to be really clear,
Yeah, I think he's saying post-Mormon, but it does sound like
for-profit event. It is guaranteed to lose money.
Morte.
We priced the tickets at $15 a person. Just the venue and the audio visual and the marketing that we're doing is going to put it at least in the $20,000 range. And there's virtually no way that we're going to get enough people to sign up to pay that off. So it will operate at a loss. We have a few underwriters that are supporting it, but we just want to make sure, even though it's being run under an LLC for the sake of expediency and by the request of the underwriters.
You're incredible, Sky. You can do it.
It is not a for-profit event. It will lose money, but we're willing to do it, and our underwriters are willing to do it because we care passionately about people leaving Mormonism and helping them find healing and growth. So if you want to support a worthwhile thing, please come to Thrive. You can go to thrivebeyondmormonism.com and you can register there. Please share it with friends and family. We'd love to get a few thousand people there. And right now, registration's around 780, I think. But,
yes, you should stream
we'll
Sky.
780. That's phenomenal. But please join us and please share. thrivebeyondmormonism.com. Please sign up. Please tell your friends, and we'd love to have you. All right. So without any further ado, let's get to the main reason why we're doing this interview. Chris Shelton, we're so thrilled to have you back on Mormon Stories podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. And I think there's been a lot of real fun, positive comments back on this. So it's a good thing we're getting this done. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, have you gotten any specific feedback? And if so, tell us a little bit about what you've heard.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I was sharing the playlist that you put up of our podcasts previously and our live streams, and people were really happy. They were happy you and I had gotten together. They were happy to get a full, one shot. Here's the story of, L. Ron Hubbard. Here's the story of David Miscavige told all in in detail, so that people could kind of see some of the behind the scenes of it and not just the generalized picture of it and stuff. And I've never had a chance to break it all down in this lengthy kind of format before, all in one go. And I think there's been some
Sky, if you want to do it in the Discord ever, let me know, and you can be closed. or you can do unlisted, but I'd love to watch you crochet.
Appreciation of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Just because I've received the same very positive feedback from so many people already, Chris, about this, what is it, do you think, about seeing another religion, through someone else's eyes that helps you connect to your own experience and see your own experience more clearly? Do you have a theory about that?
Well, it's fascinating because this has been something we've known about for a long time, is that one of the ways that, and I think, if I recall correctly, that it was Steve Hassan who first made the observation
It's Hassan,
that
but
by
it's okay.
educating or talking about other destructive cults, one is able to, with defenses down, see parallels, start making connections between that group, which they're not invested in emotionally. So the hackles don't come out, the defenses don't come up. They're going, oh, those crazy Scientologists, right? And, oh, L. Ron Hubbard does this and this and this, and Scientologists believe this and this and this, and they act like this and this and this, and maybe, and the person watching goes, no, wait a second, that sounds kind of familiar, and they start connecting dots, but they're doing it because it's being presented to them as an education, and it's not being presented to them as your group is, X label that they can't deal with. And so so that way the data kind of goes in and it's more acceptable to receive it that way. And then the dots start connecting. So it's not a guaranteed way of getting across to people, but it is a proven way of doing it. And I think that's something that the watchers of this from both our camps have thought was a positive of this.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
And I'll be curious to explore this with you later. I've been pretty open and consistent throughout my 14 years career as a podcaster.
So I did a guesstimate of how long so there's this pattern for this sweater where it's panels, and then you kind of like do the mattress stitch and you connect them together like for the collar and stuff, but you have to do the length. So I'm doing 250. Let me move this back, I guess. I'm doing 250 stitches. I'm at 138. And this is the reason I ended up going with this machine is because their counters are more reliable than the Centro and some of the other ones. But it clicks when it comes back to the black needle. And so it tracks you around. So I'm doing 250 stitches, not including my waist yarn. I don't know why it's doing that, but and then you seam it off, and then you mattress stitch the sides to the panels. Yep. Hope you're having fun in Minecraft.
My goal is actually not to get people to leave Mormonism. And I'll be curious if you end up agreeing with this. I actually see, and this may be bias, this may be ignorance, but I actually see Scientology and Jehovah's Witness sort of as they are in 2019, especially because of the explicit shunning or the designation of people as subversive persons or whatever you guys call it, SPs.
Suppressive, right?
Yeah. That taking, they taking them to a level where it's even way worse than Mormonism. And so even though I talk about cults and we explore cults, I want to make clear that my goal is not to get people out of Mormonism per se. It's just to help people see what they're a part of, see the harm that it's causing, and then help them make more informed decisions about their life. And if that means staying in the church, but just doing so with the full awareness of the harm and the cost and the benefit, that's great. Now, Chris, maybe at the end you can share your motives for what you do. I think we'll get to that as we talk about activism.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Chris. So let's begin with your story, but I want to start before you. I think I recall you saying that your parents were Scientologists. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to go back in your genealogy to the point where no one in your family was a genealogist, was a Scientologist. And I want to see, were they secular or were they religious before they converted to Scientology? And whoever that is, if it's okay, let's start there, or earlier if there's something that's really important for the story.
Yeah, no problem. My parents both grew up in the Midwest. My dad in Kansas, my mom in Illinois. My mom grew up in a deeply Catholic home, big family, I think 9 brothers and sisters, and she was, I believe, the oldest. And my father grew up in a similar large family, I think 7 or 8 brothers and sisters. You know, he kind of grew up on a farm.
We have 100 rows to go.
Rural Kansas.
Or a little under 100.
And he joined, he got out of that life, joined the Navy, got stationed out in Wisconsin or Illinois or something, and ended up meeting my mom. My mom had gone to nursing school, Catholic nursing school, and was just kind of getting out and about and, you know, learning the world and all that. And they met up and hooked up and ended up getting married. And my dad actually was not Catholic, was not very overtly religious. And my mom was, you know, not so super excited about Catholicism anymore, but she'd been raised with it. So that was kind of the worldview. So they had a Catholic wedding. My dad had to go and do some classes and stuff and meet with the Catholic priest and all that. And they did the Catholic wedding. And I think after that, they pretty much dropped it because they never mentioned or said much of anything about Catholicism after that. You know, my dad was in the Navy. They bounced around here and there and other places. Eventually, in 1969, my mom got pregnant with me. And
okay, so we were born the same year.
Yeah, I'm 40. Yeah, I'm 49.
Okay, so I'm 50.
Yeah, December I turned 50.
All right.
So yeah, and so December '69 I was born. I was born at a naval hospital in California, Port Hueneme, and at this point, my parents were pretty much, you know, lapsed. I think I would say, from what I understand, that my mom was a lapsed Catholic at this point. She wasn't, you know, practicing or anything, and my dad certainly wasn't. He had started going to college and stuff on the GI Bill, and he was pursuing computer science. And this was, you know, in 1969, 1970, 71, right? So computer science was still big. Reel-to-reel magnetic, you know, tape, and there were no floppy drives. There was no internet. There was none of that stuff at this point yet, right? So he was doing programming and systems analyst stuff. Anyway, my folks got divorced when I was 2. They had a contentious, I guess, somewhat rocky relationship, fighting and stuff, and they ended up breaking up and getting officially divorced, and they had joint custody of me. I would go back and forth. And I barely remember. I have just a couple memories from this time period, right? Being 2, 3, 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, my father's brother was living out in Vegas. We were still out in California, and he did a communications class, as I understand it. He did some kind of one of their simple comm course, what they call the comm course, the communications course. And this is a course that teaches how to communicate better, interpersonal relationship sort of thing. Very simple, common sense kind of drills or practical exercises that you do, like practicing looking somebody in the eye for long periods of time, practicing you know, getting somebody sort of taunting you or teasing you and being able to just kind of sit there and deal with it and not have to react or get violent or weird or whatever in response. That's kind of a skill, you know, being able to deliver a communication, being able to hear somebody, acknowledging, I mean, simple stuff. And I stress this because years later, this is how I got into Scientology too, is through this class. So I convinced my dad. He did it and thought it was good stuff. And he wrangled my mom into it. My mom had been having some rough times emotionally, some ups and downs during that time. And he kind of got her into Scientology by convincing her that it was the thing that was going to help her with that. And even though they were still divorced, I guess they were still friendly. And she went in and started doing that. And they eventually got some marriage counseling. So this is another service Scientology offers, is counseling services. And there's a whole array of them, and I won't get into all the details because it would take hours just to explain all that. But the counseling for marriage counseling involves having both people in the room, both partners in the room at the same time, and basically having the counselor ask them back and forth, what have you done to your marital partner, and what have you withheld from your marital partner? So it's a way of sort of clearing the air and getting all of the, things you did that you don't want them knowing about, stuff, getting all the secrets out, And for some relationships, that's a great way to heal a relationship. It's not, universally workable, but of course, the way Scientology works is it claims that its methods will work on every single person every single time. So, they always overpromise and underdeliver, but it's not that their services are completely useless, especially at the lower levels. The communications class and this marriage counseling are good examples of that, where my parents bit. They got something out of it, so much so that they actually decided to get back together and they got remarried.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
it's interesting. It's interesting. I don't want to say, maybe I shouldn't say cool. Maybe I should say cool. I don't know, but it's interesting. Can I just tell you a couple things really quick?
Absolutely.
So as I think about Mormonism, number one, Mormonism tends to target, through its missionary efforts, two groups of people. One is super poor people in third world countries, like Latin America, Philippines, Africa, or in the United States, just anyone who's super poor, who needs a leg up, who needs a community, who's trying to advance to a higher station socioeconomically. And that is the vast majority of our missionary efforts. And, a huge percentage, you're either born into Mormonism or you're converted, and you're likely converted as someone in a third country who's super poor, a third world country who's super poor. And then another group that the Mormon missionaries target,
tilting it up to see the count,
are just people whose lives are on the down and out. People who are just broken, sad, depressed, feeling a sense of meaninglessness. And that's how these organizations often work. And then the second thing I just noticed is this idea of missionary work through service is so, I don't want to say insidious. It's sneaky, or it's profound, or I guess if you're a sincere believer, it's effective. But when I think of Mormon missionaries, they often go to these countries like Japan or Korea. What do they do to get, or Russia? What do they do to get people in the doors? They offer English lessons, right? So again, they're targeting, people on the lower socioeconomic end of a certain country, and then they offer a service. So in your case, it's mental health services or counseling services. In Mormonism's case, the 19-year-old boys certainly aren't, or 18-year-old boys now, 19-year-old girls certainly aren't going to be offering, marriage counseling to people, but they certainly can offer English lessons because they know English. And again, focusing on the down and out and or offering a service is just such an effective way to end up bringing people into your organization.
For sure. And one comment I'll make on that, because this is a point where Scientology and Mormonism diverge, actually. So I'm glad you brought this up, is that Scientology is definitely looking for people who are having traumatic episodes or episodes of stress, trauma, loss, looking for some kind of help. But they are not interested in poor down and outers. And Scientology is very specific about this, and it's actually kind of interesting as a difference. Scientology is not in a position to be able to afford to do that. L. Ron Hubbard was clear in Scientology that it is to make the able more able, which is code word for people with money. And because the people who are able are people who are getting along in life, who are self-sufficient, taking care of themselves. So clearly these are people who have income potential. And my father was one of those people. I mean, sure, he had a divorce. There was an emotional component there and a loss. Same with my mom. But my dad was a computer programmer. I mean, and, you know, he was ex-Navy. He was doing just fine in life, as far as I understand, financially and stuff. And my mom was a nurse. I mean, she was pulling down money. You know, she was a pediatric nurse. So they both were financially, you know, not bad off. And of course, the similarity, the component that is the same between what you described and what I'm talking about, is that you somehow, the cult has to, or the group has to, help the person. Somehow they have to get some assistance rendered to the person so as to convince them that this group is helpful, useful, something they want in their life, and be open to receiving more help from them, which is when the religious stuff comes in with the Mormons, and when the bridge to total freedom comes in Scientology, where, you know, we've literally got a bridge to sell you, but it's not a physical bridge, you know?
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
And then the only other thing I'll mention is, and this is going to come up a lot, I'm guessing, during this session, just the central component of these private, I'll call it ecclesiastical interviews. You know, Mormonism right now is being rocked by Sam Young's efforts to expose how abusive how seemingly innocuous, but ultimately abusive these ecclesiastical interviews can be, where a church leader gets you behind closed doors and starts asking you super private and personal questions. You think that it's just them trying to help you. And I'm not going to say that never happens. In fact, I know there are going to be, in our case, Mormon bishops and Mormon leaders that genuinely just want to help and that genuinely are helpful. But there's this idea of gathering information and then somehow it being used or leveraged against you. In Scientology, we know that that's way more intense, and we're going to learn about that.
Hope you sleep well.
With today. But in Mormonism, it's getting you on that treadmill of guilt and shame where you feel awful about yourself because the church has information that it gleaned from these private interviews that make you feel beholden to the church, or guilty, that make you feel like you need the church to get better. So I'm just calling that out, because as I hear parallels, I'm gonna want to make those associations.
Absolutely, of course, and that's a common manifestation with almost all of these groups. You know, is they're looking to solve a problem you have, deal with a stress you have, deal with a trauma you have, and or help you in some other substantial fashion. You know, some substantive fashion that you agree was help, and you know, once you can get that, that's a massive piece of trust that you gain from a person, 10, right? 11. If you help them in some fashion, they will automatically be more friendly, open, and less defensive toward your efforts, even to get money out of you. So, so that's the component there that works for recruitment. And it worked for my parents, you know, and I was 4 years old at the time. I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention, but I was happy to, you know, I assume I was happy to have my parents together again. And that's what I remember. And we ended up moving to Pasadena, California, and we got an apartment there. We had not yet purchased a house. My folks had been apartment livers, and I started going to school. And you know, there was kindergarten, and then there was actual grade school in Pasadena. And the Scientology, you know, aspect of my life, for me, manifested in various expressions of discipline, of a disciplinary nature, or them trying to use Scientology principles on me. And I'll give you a couple examples, because they're kind of unique and different from anything in Mormonism or any other groups, really. There's a concept in Scientology of a reactive mind, that your mind is divided in three different parts. There's a somatic mind, reactive mind, and analytical mind. And the reactive mind is the one that gets all the attention. It's you know, maybe comparable to Freud's id, or you know, it's not the same thing. It's its own thing. The reactive mind in Scientology is the part of your mind that stores all the moments of pain and unconsciousness of your life. And unconsciousness could be for a microsecond. It doesn't have to be for a long time. Every time you experience pain, you have a hammer hit your thumb, you have that microsecond of unconsciousness. Now, this is all Hubbard's nonsense. This is not how this stuff really works. But Hubbard says that you hit your hand with a hammer and you have pain and you have unconsciousness. And what that does is it reverses, how your mind's working, where you're operating on your analytical mind and your rational mind, your thinking, your aware, your memories, all that. That goes into sort of in operation, and the reactive mind goes into operation. And it starts recording everything that's happening so that in the future, should you run across similar contextual circumstances, and maybe you hear the same things, maybe you smell the same things, maybe there's something about your current environment that's similar to the time you got hurt, it's going to go into activation again to try to prevent you from, hitting your hand with a hammer again, or getting bit by the dog, or getting hit by a car, whatever it was that happened to you. Those moments are called engrams. It's an old medical term for a cellular a memory trace on a cell. And Hubbard avoided structure originally. He said, we don't know how the mind is storing this stuff or where the mind is located. And eventually he said, it's not the brain, it's some energy field around you, which is, which you can't detect, of course, but it's there. And this reactive mind has all this, compounded experience of your life.
It's just,
and later on says that this includes your past lives, because in Scientology, you are an immortal spiritual being who has lived forever. And so you've accumulated lots and lots, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of engrams from your past lives. And you're carrying those all around with you also.
And I just have to say, and it sounds like an engram is kind of like a sin, right? It's basically something bad that's associated with you, right?
Yes, but it's not an immoral act. A sin has a moral component to it. An engram is simply an unfortunate accident or incident that happens to you that has pain and unconsciousness. So
okay,
I think I picked up all the stitches.
The other thing is, note that religions like to tell you things about yourself.
Yeah, so we're good. So this side's closed. Here it is. There's where I dropped it.
But that they tell you they know because it makes you feel good, and telling you that you existed before you were born, and that they know you existed before you were born.
So that's a drop
stitch.
stitch.
They even try and tell you who you were.
It's not the end of the world.
Before you were born, fills an existential hole or a question that you would have about yourself. And, it's why people go to mediums. It's like, tell me about, my loved ones died and how are they? Yeah, your mind would want to pay someone to get that information. And that's why mediums exist. And religions provide that function. In Mormonism, they tell you that you were a spirit that existed in a pre-existence with a loving Heavenly Father, and that you chose the side of Jesus over Satan in the pre-existence. And that gets you excited. And I'm just noting that Scientology has what we call a pre-existence theology as well.
Very much so. Almost all of Scientology is founded on this principle of a thetan, or spiritual entity, right? That is the true you. You are not your body. You are a thetan.
And Mormons, it's a spirit. It's a spirit.
Or a spirit, yeah. Hubbard has used the word spirit or soul because there's a lot of other religious baggage connected with those terms. So I take care to make the same differentiation only because it's not exactly the same thing.
No, I want that. So keep that up.
I want to be clear about that. A thetan has no existence in the physical universe. And this is one of the weird contradictions of Scientology that doesn't really make any logical sense, but you buy into it because it sounds like it makes kind of sense until you think about it too much. But in Scientology, you are an immortal spiritual being called a thetan. It comes from the Greek letter theta. Hubbard just said, okay, thetan, theta, stick an N on it, and we'll call it a thetan. And life force or life energy is,
It's
or
not
the
perfect, but I'm
component
gonna
of
put
a
a
thetan
border
that
on
makes
my
it a
thing,
thetan is
and it's
theta.
better than having drop
And
stitches.
it's this sort of energy, but it's not a physical manifestation. It's not energy
What a
like,
bummer.
like butane lighters and you see the gas, that's not that kind of energy. It's a higher non-physical kind of existence. So it's not ectoplasmic. It's not,
Oh, is this gonna drop down too?
interdimensional. It's not of this universe at all. It's foreign to this universe. Okay. It came into this universe 4 quadrillion years ago and manifested a life force that has driven, the causative life elements of this universe for 4 quadrillion years. And that sounds like a ridiculously large number, but Hubbard said that the physical universe is much, 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 much older than Earth science has discovered or allows for. And Hubbard loves to contradict science and stuff, and we'll get to more of that, I'm sure, later. But the important part here that I want to get to is that how I was raised was with 11. These ideas. Like, this was how the world works. There are thetans. You are a thetan. You are not your little body. You are a spiritual entity. That was one of the first things I remember learning from a Scientology aspect, right? And so the reactive mind is also sometimes referred to as the bank. It's a bank, like a storehouse of pictures of pain and unconsciousness. And so they call it the reactive bank. And it's just another term in Scientology. Well, for children growing up in Scientology, you're not told about the reactive mind. You're told about your bank. And when you're acting up and crying and out of sorts, because you're hungry or tired or whatever's going on, you're told, stop being banky. Because that's supposed to be all the crying and all the other nonsense is a manifestation of your reactive mind, you see. And so you need to stop doing that. You need to stop being banky. This was a phrase I heard all through my childhood. Other people might grow up with, if you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about. My parents were not physically abusive. They didn't do anything like that. They would just talk to me sternly and tell me that I needed to stop being banky. So I grew up with this idea that there was a part of my mind that definitely existed, which held all these, these uncomfortable, harmful parts of my life, and would, sort of use those back on me and make me upset, make me angry, make me, fearful, make me griefy. All of these are what are called minus emotions or misemotions in Scientology. This was also something I learned early on. So there's negative emotions and there's positive emotions. And these are on a scale in Scientology called the emotional tone scale. It's an actual numbered chart where Hubbard charted or plotted emotions and gave them numbers and gave them a rank order and said that, at the top is serenity of beingness and happiness and aesthetics and joy. And as you come down, you go into boredom and antagonism and anger. Right,
so there's
and
our panel.
And fear and a tone called covert hostility and grief and apathy. And then at the bottom at 0 is body death. You're dead.
Yep. You are correct,
and
Fizzlesticks.
This gradation of emotions has a tremendous impact on Scientologists, especially Scientology kids, because now your emotions have a numerical value connected with them.
I'll be right back.
And there are good emotions and there are bad emotions. And initially, this might sound great as a disciplinary measure to teach your kids to not be misemotional and not cry and have tantrums and be angry. But what this does is it creates a situation where as a child, I was being taught to suppress my natural reactions to things. And I'm not saying that children should be allowed to just run around and be little hellions and temper tantrum, purveyors. But, there's nothing wrong with curbing unsocial behavior or inappropriate behavior in a social setting, but this carries over to when you're by yourself.
Whoops.
And I would get angry or get upset, or I'd get, I would experience a loss and I would feel grief. And I would tell myself, stop being banky.
Yeah.
Stop experiencing that. That's not you doing that. This is actually right here is the actual damaging part of this. You're not the one who's causing that emotion to occur. Therefore, it's some other external thing called your reactive mind. Therefore, you need to learn to control your emotions by eschewing that and being happy. Let's be happy. Come on, put a smile on your face. Turn that frown upside down. All this kind of stuff taken to an extreme, right? And so right out of the starting gates of my life, I was being taught to suppress my emotions. And I can just tell you that for me and other people I've spoken with at length about this, that kind of behavior is not good for a child and not good for an adult. It leads to bad, going to bad places and doing bad things.
So there's several. Can I just say this is so great? Yeah. There's several connections. First of all, you just triggered one. There's a primary song we sang as kids. If you chance to meet a frown, do not let it stay. Quickly turn it upside down and smile that frown away.
Yeah.
This idea that emotions are bad, but it goes much deeper. Mormons are taught, and Christians are often taught, that there are satanic spirits out there that are trying to influence you and to get you to do bad things. Also, Mormons have a long history of being anti-science and anti-mental health. And what I'm getting at that I think is really insidious and dangerous in the long run is this idea, number one, that these folk weird theories that these religious leaders come up with about how the mind works and how behavior works that are anti-science are based on just the weird theories of people who haven't done any studies on human behavior of the mind. Teaches you that there are external forces that really don't exist that are influencing you. And they also teach you that you're not necessarily fully in control of what's going on, that instead you're this force being acted upon by these weird external forces that really don't exist. But more importantly, they're just basically training you to understand the world and yourself and your mind and your behavior in ways that have no empirical validity. So it's a way, I don't know, it seems, how can it not be doing a disservice to be teaching people that they have everything, that they don't have everything they need to be well? In other words, what if you taught people that emotions were healthy, that emotions were important, that anger and sadness were just as important as happiness? And more importantly, that if you could base your behavior on valid principles of empirically supported, mental health, then you could find wellness in a viable way versus being hooked into a weird anti-science-based theology and framework that really ends up sort of serving the purposes of the organization, but not necessarily the well-being of the individual adherent. Am I making sense?
No, absolutely. That's exactly, I agree completely. One, all of this is pseudoscientific nonsense. I mean, grading emotions with some arbitrary numbers and putting in a scale of sequence and saying this is the way people act, and every single person goes up and down this scale uniformly. You will always go from boredom to antagonism to anger to grief to, apathy. That's always the sequence. Well, it's not always the sequence, and it's observably not always the sequence, but they've always got some answer as to why what you think you're seeing is what you're not seeing, and so there's all of that, and there is the control aspect of it too. But I really feel that that when you assign your own personal feelings or emotional experience or emotional life to some external force, you remove the causative ability of a person to be the architect
Right.
of their own experiences.
That's right.
You know, because
Bingo.
it turns out we do generate our own emotions. Of course we do. It's an interpretation of our experience of going through life. But when you are teaching children that there's some boogeyman in their mind, and that's what's causing them, or demons or spirits or, you know, angry spirits or some nonsense, then you're teaching the child that they can't ever truly control their emotional life or experience, because there's these monsters around them that somehow they have to telepathically or have conversations in their heads with. And it almost begs the child to become schizophrenic. It's really crazy making. And it's damaging to people psychologically to teach them nonsense like this in their formative years. It has taken me years to overcome this nonsense since coming out of Scientology. I could not experience loss or you know, healthily experience you know, the stages of grief. One, in coming out of the cult, and two, losing somebody that I actually wanted to marry in coming out of the cult. I had both of those things hit me pretty hard, and it took me a long time, longer than it should have, you know, and it's already going to be a bad enough experience. So these formative teachings that the Scientologists or Mormons or anybody is imparting to children, you know, we're only now really starting to understand from a scientific end or view why this is damaging to children. But it's been known for a long ass time. You know, don't beat on your kids. Don't feed them a stable of comforting lies, and don't tell them things that, you know, that are absolutely true when they're not absolutely true. It's not helpful to the child at all. You are setting them up to fail. And this is, I get on a roll about this because I really hate what some people do to their kids. They set them up for such losses with this nonsense.
Yeah. And
You know?
and then I think about like, in Mormonism, conversion therapy or reparative therapy. That's just one extreme instance of where, you know, the science is pretty clear that you can't voluntarily change your sexual orientation. And yet, you know, when a religion has a motive, which is we can't have gay people, they're going to reject what the scientific evidence shows and then come up with these strange theories about how, you know, borrowing on Freudian sort of concepts, somehow trans or LGBT youth can be converted to, you know, a straight orientation. It just causes mental illness and depression and ultimately suicide. And it's really reckless. I wish, but what it comes down to is the religion needs to be the authority in all things.
Well, exactly.
It can't allow science to be an authority, or else the religion gets undermined. And so it's oil and water from the very beginning.
And the people who are doing that probably believe it because they're raised to believe that it's demons, it's devils, it's the devil in you. You know, or it's some bad angel, or it's some, you know, some bad thought you had when you were 4 or something, or you looked at porn and how dare you. And I mean, the reasons why these people believe that people are, you know, LGBT or even are having a temper tantrum are ludicrous, but they're all based in these models of reality that have no, as you mentioned, no empirical proof or evidence or any, there's no evidentiary basis for any of this nonsense. And it's just some idiot's idea of how the world works, and people adopt it as though it's, you know, sacred lore, and they raise their kids with this stuff. And then they wonder why the kids are stressed out all the time and acting out even more as teenagers. And, and there you go. So, okay. So let's see here. Getting back to my story.
So you were talking about how your parents would talk about the bank.
Yeah. So don't be banky.
Don't be banky.
I had to give you all that exposition so that statement would make sense to you, right? Don't be banky. Don't be misemotional, right? Get your emotions in check, control yourself, this kind of thing. Not an uncommon refrain for parents to their children. I'm not saying that I'm unusual in that regard, but I'm trying to stress this point about the bank because I want people to get that this sets up this idea of how the world is. And I would try to explain this to my friends. And of course they would laugh at me because they had their own indoctrination from their parents about how the world works. There's nobody smarter about how the brain works than a second grader, So, so I started, so I kind of grew up with this. And there were also Scientology procedures that my parents would try to apply with me as a young child, to get over injuries or accidents. There was a thing called an assist. There's lots and lots of different kinds of assists in Scientology, but they're little physical remedies that you do to supposedly resolve accidents so that they don't necessarily go into your reactive mind, or they don't come back and bite you in the butt later on so hard. And this consists of, for example, let's say I fall down and scrape my knee. So there's this thing called a touch assist where you go back through the motions in slow motion. You go back through the motions of the accident and you touch or contact. Sorry, this is a contact assist, not a touch assist. It's contact assist. The actual, let's say it was my elbow, so I can show you here. Let's say I scrape my elbow on the ground. Well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to put myself in the position and I'm going to recontact the exact place on the ground where I hurt myself. And by continuing to do this motion, I am running out the accident. I'm re-experiencing the accident in real time, and that is supposed to remove the harmful elements of it from my reactive mind. This was something I was raised to do, and again, this it took years to undo this stuff, right? So and these little contact assists and touch assists and this assist and that assist, they don't work. They don't do anything. But, you can convince yourself that they do. And again, I was 5 years old, 6 years old when I was first learning about this stuff. So the idea of having a critical thinking response to it, or questioning it, or looking at it and going, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's no part of my 6-year-old brain, right? That's not what's happening when I'm 6 or 7 years old. My parents say, do this, and this is what I do. And they tell me this is what it's doing, and I believe them. And so this is, these assists were another part of growing up. So was a near hysterical level of looking up words in dictionaries. Now, it definitely helped me to become a more literate person to look up words in dictionaries. But Scientology takes it, of course, to the nth degree. When you look up a word in a dictionary, you don't just find the definition that fits for how you're using it. You have to go through all of them and make up sentences and understand every single definition and the derivation and where the word comes from and all the various uses of it and idioms and synonyms. And it's this big, long affair. And this was drummed into me that this was the only way to learn, because in Scientology, the only thing that keeps you from learning something is if you don't have, is making sure that you understand all the words. And of course, this is not true. This is empirically not true. It's absolutely not true. But this is what I was taught, right? So I was raised with this sort of paranoia about words and how I need to understand them. And this carried on all through my Scientology life. And again, a side effect of it was that I'm a pretty literate person. But I'd prefer to not have to have endured the hours and hours and hours of tears of the frustration of trying to understand things that were way above my head. Because if there's a word in the definition you don't understand, you got to go look that one up in the dictionary and do the whole drill on that word and then go back. And then if there's another one, you got to clear that up. So you could end up spending hours in a dictionary just trying to understand one sentence of a 20-page paper you're trying to read. This would happen to me in high school. And it was just like, it made study torturous. And learning not really a whole lot of fun. And I was somebody who enjoyed learning things because I liked learning new stuff. But the methodology that Scientology makes you go through to learn this stuff and try to be a good Scientologist by using and following Hubbard's advice it was crazy making, So those were some of the basic principles of Scientology that were given to me as a child to use. Then there was the ethics system. Okay, so let me tell you about this. I'll tell you a story instead of talking in theoreticals here. In I think around 4th grade, we went to a planetarium and got a little lecture from the woman there, really nice lady, about the sun, the moon, and the stars, and and we were shown graphics and all this stuff, and it was really cool. And we were having a good time. And I was a cut up in school. I was the kid who would never stop talking, and I know that's going to be a shock to everybody who's ever heard me talk. But I was like all the time in school. And so during this talk from this planetarium person, she says, they used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the sun went around the Earth. And I just couldn't help myself. I think I was, like I said, in 4th grade. And I just blurted out right in front of everybody, well, that was stupid. What a bunch of stupid idiots they were, right? Because of course we had just learned that the Earth was not the center of the universe, right? And this stopped everything. And she kind of looked at me, and the teacher frowned, and a couple people tittered, and it was not really that big of a deal, but it was made into a big deal because the teacher reported me to my parents and sent me home with this note about what a bad kid I was for speaking out and being so rude and disrupting the whole presentation. And so this is where I learned about Scientology ethics. And I had to do a series of steps that were called a liability formula. In Scientology, there are what are called conditions of existence, and they have these, at any time you're in this condition, and it's normal, it goes from affluence, normal, emergency, danger, non-existence, liability. And liability is when you have become a bad person and you're now acting against the interests of whatever group you're involved in, or acting against the interests of yourself. And there are these steps you have to do in order to get back in the good graces of the group that you have now become a liability to. And my mother determined that because I had spoken up and made this embarrassing, gaffe, that I was now a liability to my class and specifically to my teacher. And I needed to make up for this. And the formula for the liability, the steps you have to do, is you have to decide who are your friends. And then you have to deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group you've been pretending to be part of despite personal danger. And that's a big mouthful. And it was a huge mouthful for me when I was in 4th grade. And I had to spend hours and hours figuring out how I was going to make up the damage to my teacher. I was, what was important to me as a 4th grader, my 25-cent allowance every week was really important to me. So I said, well, I could give her my allowance for this week. That'll, I'll try to do something to help her and somehow suffer through as an atonement or something. Because that's basically what liability is. It's like you're making amends or atoning for your sins. And my mom laughed at me and said that was ridiculous. What was my teacher going to want a quarter with, And I was, just sitting there, and I was supposed to solve it myself. I was supposed to figure the whole thing out. And I don't remember exactly. I think I ended up writing her a big apology. I think I wrote her this big sorry note and told her how sorry I was. And it was just, the whole thing I remember is very grueling and very torturous and very much not something that I understood why I was doing this. It's kind of odd that you're made to go through all these steps. And this happens in Scientology all the time. You're made to go through all these steps because somebody else has judged that your behavior is immoral or improper or inappropriate. But if the final lesson of going through all that atonement is not a recognition on your own part that what you did was wrong,
yeah, they could have
and a
freaking
true
had him
reckoning
apologize.
that you should be making amends, you should be doing something, or you should somehow curb that behavior in the future. If that's not the end result of the activity, then it's just a big waste of time. You're just checking boxes, and satisfying somebody else's demands of how the world should work. And that was basically the end result of this thing, is I just sort of felt sorry for speaking up, but I never really was sorry. I didn't think what I had done was that bad. And again, it was just hours and hours of getting, lambasted for this. So that was where I first encountered Scientology ethics.
Let me ask you this.
What
Chris.
would be many encounters with Scientology ethics.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Was that the last part? What time is it? Oh my God, it's 3 a.m. Yeah, he was 4th grade though. Yeah, 10 years old. Oh my God, we're still listening. Okay. That just seems cruel. Hello, Shadow. The culture shock for these kids raised in cults when they finally get exposed to normalcy. Yep.
In the Mormon world, and maybe in the Christian world, as a kid, your first memories of church are going to be going to church, sitting in, sacrament meeting, as they call it in Mormonism, going to primary, learning the songs. So sort of a regular church attendance every week, and getting together with other families or other children, and the kind of children or youth programs that emerge throughout childhood and adolescence of religious instruction, of song, of community building. Does any of that play into the life of a child growing up in Scientology, or to your life? What was the weekly, we'll just call it religious observance like?
Well, in Scientology, there are Sunday services, but that came way later. Scientology doesn't have weekly rituals as such. What they have is they have classes that they offer, and they have counseling. And those are the services that Scientology provides. In many, many ways, Scientology is a lot more like a business than it is a religion. It sells classes, it sells counseling by the hour, and you pay set donation rates for those services or for those classes. And of course, they're selling books and lectures of L. Ron Hubbard's. So those are supposed to be its main income streams. And Sunday services, prayers, things like that, none of that's really a thing in Scientology. There's no God figure in Scientology. I wasn't raised to believe in God. God was a non-entity for me growing up. It was somebody that I was familiar with the concept of God because other children were being raised with God belief. And I sort of, I didn't really know what to think about it. I was sort of like, well, what do my parents think about it? And they seemed kind of ambivalent about it. Didn't seem really clear cut one way or the other. And Scientology doesn't really get into God very much. So none of that was part of the upbringing, right? Scientology prides itself on being a practical, applied religious philosophy. So it's all about assists and the tone scale and auditing and these things that you do in your life is what Scientology is more kind of how it operates. And so but there is definitely a social life in Scientology. And I was going to mention that my parents very much started hanging around with other Scientologists, having them over. All of our friends growing up were Scientologists. Not my friends. I met friends at school and stuff who obviously were not Scientologists, but because I didn't go to private school, I went to public school. My parents couldn't afford private school because they were paying for Scientology with all their money. So all of our money was pretty much going to Scientology. And we did buy a house. We bought a very, very cheap fixer-upper in Pasadena as our first house, and we moved into that when I hit 4th grade. And so I started going to Linda Vista in Pasadena. We kind of lived just by the Rose Bowl in Pasadena.
Oh, I know where that is.
And that was where our first house was. And my dad started fixing that up, and they were actually starting to work for Scientology now at the Pasadena Mission. It was not an official, full-blown Scientology organization, what we call an org. They don't call them churches. They call them orgs. I mean, that kind of gives you an idea of the flavor of how people think about Scientology. in the world of Scientology. Nobody thinks of Scientology as a church. They call it a church, but they don't think about it that way. They think about it as a place that you go to do classes and get counseling. So my parents were working at the Pasadena mission, and for years they did that, and they made friends with all the other staff, and we had parties and things, and all those people would come over. We'd go over to their houses or whatever. Our best friends, my parents' best friends, were Scientologists, and so I grew up around all these people. So it was interesting how my parents ceased having non-Scientology friends. I watched that happen. We were just surrounded by other Scientologists. And the attitude and the things they would say, right? And this is another thing that spills over, and it's another aspect of things that happen in your formative years. I overheard conversations because I was there during these parties and stuff. They'd be sitting around drinking and laughing and listening to music, and the kids would run around. And I would hear them have conversations about the wogs. Okay, now wog is a very derogatory racial term in Britain. I didn't know this, right? This was a term Hubbard used to describe non-Scientologists. In the same way that in the Harry Potter world, if you're either in the wizarding world or you're a muggle. Muggles are people who don't have the magic, right?
Right.
Well, in Scientology, if you're a wog, you don't have the magic. You literally don't, you're not a Scientologist. You haven't learned the truth yet. So you're a wog. And again, I know that this is a derogatory term, and I'm kind of stressing it because I know that now. At the time, that we were using it, I didn't even know it had a racial component to it. But I would listen to the parents and my parents and their friends talking about the wogs and how stupid and idiotic and dumb the wogs are, and how none of the wogs get it, and the wogs are destroying the world, and the this and the that. So the us versus them, they didn't have to even talk to me directly to set that up. I just had to overhear them talking about it because my dad would go on a roll, man. And if there was somebody who influenced my opinions growing up, it was my dad. When he got on tear about something, I was like all ears because I wanted to know how the world worked. And I thought my dad and my mom were the purveyors of truth, right? So I learned growing up that all the non-Scientologists were the ones who were destroying the world. And it was the Scientologists who were trying to save it and stop all of that. And we were the good guys and they were the bad guys. So before I even became officially a Scientologist, I thought Scientologists were the ones who were saving the world, and all the non-Scientologists were the ones actively trying to destroy it.
Yeah. And again, Mormons are going to really pick up on the parallels here. This idea that you are the chosen people, this sort of Mormon exceptionalism, that literally you're not just here to be good, you're here to save the world. In Mormon's case, we're here to usher in the coming of Jesus Christ. We're chosen by God in the last days, but you only hang around Mormons. And so that's certainly going to limit your vulnerability to outside information. It's going to limit the thoughts you're able to have, and it's going to condition you to not ask certain questions or to not behave in certain ways, because the group ends up being a really strong reinforcer of the organization's values and of their boundaries and of their limits. And so you think you're better than everyone else. You only hang around people like you, and you look down on the people that aren't part of your in-group. And this isn't just Mormonism or Scientology. This is just classic human tribalism. And it happens in almost, if you're a Redskins fan, it's that way. It's whatever organization you're in. If you're a feminist, you're gonna feel that way about non-feminists. If you're a Trump supporter, an Obama supporter, you're gonna hate the other side. But it's very clear that religions all rely on this, it seems. And so what I hear you say, Chris, is that it's not go to church every Sunday, sing songs, hear a pastor talk in Scientology. It's more you go to the local org, and you receive the trainings or the therapy or the instruction, and then your social circles are still very much with other Scientologists.
Exactly right. One other comment that I'd like to make real
Sorry, I
fast
had the
about
comments
childhood
off.
indoctrination, though, that I think is relevant and important to this conversation is that
Oh,
children don't have critical thinking skills.
Hubbard
It's
was a
not like our
racist
brains are
homophobe.
attuned to be critical thinkers. And so adults have had a chance to examine their beliefs from an adult point of view and decide whether they should or shouldn't
Blog is
believe
bad
them
here. It's what they call
for
people of
themselves.
color here
And,
instead of the
you know,
N
I'll give
word.
an adult as wide a median
Holy
as he needs or wants
shit.
or latitude to believe whatever the hell they want if they can reason through why they should believe that. At least they have the ability to reason it through. Their reasons might be ludicrous. Flat earthers come to mind, but at least they have some idea of why they have reasoned it through that they can explain to you. A child doesn't have that ability. When you tell a child he's an immortal spiritual being, he just takes it. And he doesn't have any reason to believe it except you told him. And he just accepts it as true. And this is the real problem with second gen, third gen cult members, but it's also a problem with how we indoctrinate our kids. As we give them these quote unquote truths that are not evidentiary based, as though they are, and we insist that they believe them. And in fact, in some households, children are beaten if they ask questions or express doubt. So, I think I think we really, really do need to look at how we are raising our children, because religious indoctrination is not helping them, At least I don't think so. And I think for the reasons I just explained, it's because if you're giving children information and they have no understanding of why that information is useful, important, or true, then they're not going to be able to think critically about it and ever. And that's where fanaticism comes from eventually. So anyway, just wanted to comment on that.
No, that's great. Okay.
So let's move forward a little bit because there's a lot to the story.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I haven't talked this much about my childhood in a long time.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So high school, let's see. Okay. So I guess the next official stop here would be when I was 15 years old. So I was a D&D player. I was a voracious reader. I was kind of nerdy, kind of geeky.
Wait. Let me ask you just a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Were there dietary restrictions? So
no.
Things you could and couldn't eat or drink. I'm going to ask you like a list of sort of behavioral things just in like 5 minutes.
Yep.
Were there things you couldn't eat or drink as a Scientologist?
No.
Okay. So alcohol's okay.
Alcohol's okay. Drugs are not.
Cigarettes are okay. Cigarettes are okay.
Cigarettes okay. Scientologists smoke like chimneys, especially in the 70s when I grew up. There was smoking and it was drinking. In fact, my dad actually had an alcohol problem, which I didn't learn about until later because they covered it up pretty well. But yeah, alcohol and cigarettes
Holy
are okay.
crap.
Okay. Are there
that's crazy
is there a dress
bad.
code? Are there things you can and can't wear?
No. But if you were to be overly sleazy, let's say, walking into a Church of Scientology, especially now more so than in the 70s, somebody's going to talk to you about it. But there's no official dress code or guidelines or anything like that. They're not the quiverful Duggar, types as far as that goes.
And when you say sleazy, you mean like a woman with a low-cut dress or a
or a guy, with wearing goofy shorts, or Speedos or something. I mean, somebody's gonna have something to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about like control of sexual behavior, of like masturbation, of looking at pornography, of premarital sex? Were there guidelines around sexuality for children, youth, or adults?
In the 70s, no, not so much. In the 80s and beyond is when the clamps started coming down on that. And masturbation's a no-no. This is not written down anywhere. It's all sort of in the culture of Scientology at this point. And this came from Miscavige more so than Hubbard. That there is to be, masturbation's bad, sexually.
Oh,
it's
heck
called
yeah,
sexually
I'd love to see
stimulating
it.
yourself. And the
Wait,
idea
is there
that,
any way would we be able to stream it if you like would we be able to like stream it and comment on it? we would get slapped by, I'm sure we'd get slapped by Scientology. If it's not in storage, I'll see if I can copy it. I'm not sure. I have a disk drive. Maybe I can give them to... I'm just wondering who's like an expert who could comment on them. Like Steve Hassan or John Atack or something. The nice thing about the mattress stitch is like you can barely feel it. So it's pretty flat. I mean, you can tell, but it's still pretty flat. Oh, cool. Thanks, Beth. That's incredible. Oh, why do I keep doing this? There we go.
Pulling mental image pictures when you're fantasizing. You're pulling these pictures from your mind, and some of these pictures might be coming from your reactive mind. So you're kind of reactivating that, and you're reactivating past stresses and trauma as a result of doing that. And so it could be harmful to your mental health. So you shouldn't be fantasizing too much or too heavily. And so therefore you shouldn't be, jerking it too often, because that's always, connected with fantasizing. And so that's why it's potentially bad for you. And this was based on one sentence that Hubbard wrote in a book back in 1951. And taken, they take that one line. I mean, Hubbard literally said, masturbation is not that big of a deal. Lots of species do it. And that's what's written. But then Miscavige took it and said, oh, no, look, it's very harmful to you. It's very stimulative. You should not be doing it. And has used that to bludgeon Scientologists and control their sex lives and their masturbatory lives since the 1980s.
Okay. Is adultery frowned on?
Very much so.
What
Very
about
much
just
so.
stealing and lying and the basic 10 commandments?
Yep.
So
there's
how
nothing about obviously taking the Lord's name in vain or any of that. There's no sanctity in Scientology, but there are rules about being moral. There are lots of morality rules in Scientology, but most of them are pretty common sense. Don't steal, don't lie, stuff like that. Don't hurt a person of good intent.
But do all those come from some writings of L. Ron Hubbard versus the 10 Commandments, or?
Yeah, there's a book called The Way to Happiness.
Okay, you mentioned that.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think. And that was where he codified a moral code. And that didn't exist in Scientology until 1980. So up until then, there was what was called the Code of Honor. And that came out in 1952 or 53. And Hubbard said it was a self-disciplinary code. It couldn't be enforced on you, but most Scientology ethics officers will try to enforce it on Scientologists. And the Code of Honor has things like never disparage, an ally or something. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but now all of it, of course, is escaping me right now. But you can look it up online. The Code of Honor is on the Scientology website.
But that was in some way replaced by the Way to Happiness or whatever?
Yeah, it's sort of, the Code of Honor was a pretty steep hill to climb for most people. It's got some pretty tough restrictions on it, which is one of the reasons why Hubbard said it was so, it's only it can only be enforced on a self-disciplinary way. But Scientology will enforce on you no adultery, don't be promiscuous. They're not really into promiscuity. Stuff like that. Take care of yourself, take care of your body, stuff like that.
Okay. You've kind of already addressed this, but I want to really hit it explicitly. So whether or not there's a God, whether or not Jesus lived, whether or not Jesus died for our sins, a Bible, how does Scientology approach all those things?
Hubbard calls it all nonsense. Basically,
really?
Absolutely. Hubbard regarded organized religion, and especially the Christians in the Catholic Church. He was really down on the Catholic Church all the time. He basically considered the organized religion was a control operation used to control populaces. And he thought that the priesthood, which he talked about in those terms, the priesthood, these kind of things, were people who were taking advantage of the masses for their own personal wealth and ego and that kind of thing. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, it's not like you can't find.
I can ask Spike. Oh yeah, Spike would be great. Spike knows a ton of stuff. Spike is cool. She's got birds and she knows a ton about cults. Yeah, I'm sure she would love to comment on it. Maybe she would even live stream with me. Let me press play, sorry. This the slowest part of this freaking project.
Lots and lots of instances of this. But he just wrote the whole thing off. And he said that that they were sending their prayers up to a myth, that the Christian God was a bit of a myth. And that there was this very long religious tradition that was sort of spiritual in nature, and it was sort of a good thing. And he would talk appreciatively about Buddhism and about the long spiritual tradition of the Vedas and the Vedic hymns and the Indian Hindu traditions. But he was pretty down on Western religion, and he just thought that they were out to get people's money and out to get people's, and out to control people's lives. And again, he's not particularly wrong. I've developed my own ideas about organized religion since leaving Scientology that parallel some of those, but they're not based on Hubbard's nonsense. I've come to my own conclusions about stuff.
What about God? What about God?
Yeah, God is just something that Hubbard really doesn't address very often. What he said, there's one line that I've always remembered, which is that you will not actually be able to understand God or the infinite being that is the creator until you have gone through all of Scientology's levels to the point that you have a clear understanding of every other kind of life that exists in the universe. And I'm paraphrasing right now. There's another principle in Scientology called the dynamics. Sorry, I got to give you this exposition so this sentence will make sense. But Scientology divides all of life into 8 parts. Those parts are represented as concentric circles with you in the middle. You for yourself as an entity, which is called the first dynamic, is you. The second dynamic is sex as an act, and your family, your immediate family, right? They're all second dynamic. The family you create and the family you come from, that's all second dynamic. The third dynamic is groups. Any group you're part of is part of your third dynamic. You could call your work your third dynamic. You could call a club you go to your third dynamic. It's just part of groups that you're part of. So you see these concentric circles start moving out in volume and size and influence, right? So the fourth dynamic is mankind as a whole, all people, men and women, right? Everybody. That's the fourth dynamic. Fifth dynamic is animal life, plant life, any other kind of life except people, all over the universe. This is not just on Earth, right? All life, fifth dynamic. Sixth dynamic is the material universe, matter, energy, space, and time. The seventh dynamic is spirits, all spiritual entities, any spiritual existence, anything having to do with that is seventh dynamic. And finally, the eighth dynamic is God or infinity. So Hubbard said that you will not be able to understand the eighth dynamic until you have advanced through and understand all of these first 7 dynamics. So that's the actual thing that he said and the context of it. So, you know, when you say something like that to a bunch of Scientologists, what they interpret that to mean is that they have to advance to the same level that Hubbard is at the top of the, you know, hierarchy of services and counseling that you do in Scientology. You have to get all the way to the top of that, and then you'll have some concept of what God's all about.
So it mirrors for us this continual striving for worthiness and this continual striving for advancement. It's almost like Boy Scouts on steroids. You got to get the Star Merit badge, and then the tenderfoot, then the star, then the life, then the eagle.
That's right.
And you got to do all these things to earn it. And by the way, it costs a crap ton of money and time. But
that's exactly how the bridge works.
You can achieve this super high level thing.
That's right.
Really quick, I have to ask this question about authority then. This is fascinating. So Mormonism, well, like in Catholicism, it's like, well, Jesus ordained Peter, and then Peter had Christ's permission, and then he started the church because Jesus said, upon this rock will I blah, blah, blah. And then Protestants had the problem of like, how do we break off from Catholicism but still claim to have the authority? And I don't know how they figured that out, but that's why Joseph Smith basically said that when when all the churches fell into apostasy, God had to come down and ordain Joseph Smith himself, or through, angelic spirits, as the anointed one, to lead the church in the modern day. So Joseph had to claim some sort of authority, divine authority, to be able to, call himself God's prophet on the earth. What did L. Ron Hubbard use to convince his followers that he had any authority or was special in any way where he deserved, because he's coming up with all these theories. It's very clear that just like Joseph Smith, he's taken pop psychology, he's taken maybe Freudism, he's taken pop science or just his own crazy theories and just weaving a bunch of stuff together and coming up with all these levels and all these approaches and all this key to happiness, just like any of us could. How did he convince his followers that he had any authority or, sort of like divine blessing to be telling us what truth is? Like, what made anyone pay attention to this guy?
Yeah, no, he claimed it was all a research trail. He claimed he was doing scientific research. He didn't come at this from a prophet status. In other words, he didn't come at it as though he was, giving divine revelation. Hubbard's assertions were always that his discoveries were an outgrowth or a product of his research, and that he was researching and studying man as a spiritual entity, right? And that originally with Dianetics, as you'll recall, it was a science of the mind. So Hubbard wasn't making spiritual claims with Dianetics. He was making mental claims about the modern science of mental health. People had some gain from some of those practices. Again, a small percentage of people who tried it liked it. So they said, well, there must be something to this. Hubbard must be on to something. He must be a good researcher.
Oh, cool, Beth.
And he claimed that he was an independent scientist, basically, a non-funded, self-funding sort of scientist. And when Dianetics came out, he continued doing research and lecturing frequently, weekly, and claiming that he was doing case studies and he was tracking the progress of people with different Dianetics techniques. And they were trying this and they were trying that. And when the second book came out, called Science of Survival in 1951, it was subtitled Faster, Simplified Dianetic Techniques. So it was continuing the idea that he was generating a science through research. Through those researches, Hubbard got people to take him seriously about the spiritual claims because he said that what was coming up in the research was past lives. He wasn't insisting that people had past lives, they were. And he was the one, he said, who just had to follow where the research took him, because he's being a good scientist. And we already know that his researches, quote unquote, had, zero to do with case studies. There was no peer review, and that he was asking very leading questions and driving people where he wanted them to go in their counseling sessions. So it wasn't real research, but this was how Hubbard drummed up support for himself, as he was a philosopher and a researcher.
That's fascinating.
Through those methods that he claimed to be an authority figure.
That is fascinating because for a couple of reasons. One is, I do have a PhD. I have done science or social science research. And I understand that, just understanding how statistics work, most people in the world are never going to be able to fully understand how statistics work. And then from there to become scientifically literate. So it's just a bar that a huge percent of the world is just never going to obtain. So it sounds like he did this sophisticated play that I don't know who else has done this successfully. Instead of just claiming divine authority, which is sort of a shortcut or a cop-out to sort of gaining authority, he's basically relying on the authority of science, but his interpretation of science, which is actually pseudoscience. So he's borrowing on the virtue of science, which is that science is evidence-based and empirically supported, so that everybody who doesn't have the interest or the ability or the intellect or the luxury or the privilege of really understanding science, so that those people that can't really engage scientifically think that they're engaging in something scientific and credible and empirically supported. But in reality, it's just pseudoscience. So he's borrowing on the virtues of science while not being scientific, and then discrediting anything scientifically valid if it doesn't align with his pseudoscience. That's a real mind cluster F, if I can say that.
It is. And that was exactly how he maintained the con for all those decades, because he counted on people's ignorance, their inability to do fact checking, especially pre-internet. He had no concept that the internet was coming, ever. He claimed to have all this knowledge about past intergalactic civilizations, but he never anticipated the internet. Come on, dude. But he didn't. He didn't anticipate any of that stuff. And he often made these wild-ass claims, but he would make them on the basis that this was stuff that had come up in people's auditing sessions. And the implication was that it had come up in more than one person's auditing session. So therefore, it was being cross-verified, right? These information about past civilizations and about past lives and about our spiritual abilities. And all of this was coming from research, from doing auditing and this counseling on people and taking them into these past lives. And if you look at how Hubbard did his auditing, you see that he led them down the garden path, but he was pretty crafty about it. And they thought that they were coming up with their own memories when he was clearly implanting or making suggestions about them. So he was clever. He was canny, and not everybody bought into this. I mean, mind you, there were more people who came in and left Scientology over the years than are still in it. But for the people who would believe it, come in and watch it and be part of it for a while, they would buy into this stuff. And that included my parents. They definitely, my dad went all in on this. And my dad was one of the smartest people I've ever known. He was a smart cookie. But intelligence doesn't have anything to do with it. Like I said, you help somebody and you can convince them of all kinds of things.
Yeah. In the human experience, emotion and pain trumps intellect. And so many Mormons, when they leave the Mormon church and no longer believe, they're like, how can intelligent people how can Richard Bushman, how can Terrell Givens, and these are names you won't know, but how can these Mormon scholars still believe in Mormonism? And the whole point is it's not just Trump and lived experience, emotion and lived experience trumps intellect every single time. If you're down and out and miserable, it doesn't matter how smart you are. if you're miserable and you want to die. And if someone can provide you with a life framework that can make you feel happy and healthy and like you're part of something meaningful, that is going to trump intellect 99 times out of 100 for most people. And so because life can be messy, because it sucks to be alone, because it's hard to figure out what's true, religion is always going to be formed by ingenuous or what's the word?
Disingenuous?
By industrious entrepreneurial types that basically are going to say, I figured out the way to happiness, right, and here it is. So that somebody who can't figure it out or who can't find happiness can just hold on to that way as the way because they can't figure it out themselves.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I agree with everything you just said.
Okay, so let's go back to your childhood.
So my effort at critical thinking, the one time I really tried to take a stab at Scientology before I got involved with it was when I was a teenager and I had started high school, and my friends were kind of ribbing me about my parents doing Scientology. And I was, sort of like, yeah, I don't really get, and they'd heard that, this is 1981, 82. So my parents had, my friends had sort of heard some things about Scientology. Maybe there was a 60 Minutes episode or something like that. And if you recall, at this time, Scientology was in the newspapers and Hubbard's wife was going to jail. I mean, this was a time when Scientology was not experiencing a lot of fun and games. And my parents were still diehard, supporters. They ended up becoming collateral damage in a way of that whole mission fiasco that I sort of talked about when we went through the history of all this stuff. They were working at Pasadena Mission, and they ended up getting kicked off staff and getting declared suppressive for a little while as collateral damage of this whole mission problem. But that sort of happened at a distance from me. I really wasn't aware of what was going on because I was a teenager. I didn't care about anybody else but me, right? So I was not paying a lot of attention to my parents' Scientology life. I still had a roof over my head. I still had a bed to sleep in. I was going to school. I was much more interested in trying to find a girlfriend than I was interested in anything having to do with Scientology. I got some shit about it from my friends at school. I went and confronted my mom one day and I said, hey, what's, you guys pay an awful lot of money into this Scientology stuff and I don't really get it. Why, couldn't we have nicer things? Couldn't we have a nicer life if you guys didn't spend so much money on this? It seems like a crutch, that you guys are using. And that was the most bold criticism I'd ever offered on Scientology as a child, right? I was probably 13 or 14 at this point. And my mom sort of put me in my place. She was like, well, look, we're your parents. We're adults. We get to make decisions. You're still growing up in our house. And so you've never wanted for anything. You've always had food. You've always had clothes. You've always had a bed to sleep in. So it's really not up to you to question how we spend our money. It's our money. And that was it. And I was like, okay, I have now been put in my place, Pretty rational response, really. My mom didn't she was a pretty reasonable person in many ways. So that kind of nipped any kind of criticism of Scientology and their spending habits right in the bud. And I never questioned that again. But the following year, I might have questioned it more and I might have gone in a whole different direction, except this conversation happened one fine day in the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. I was hanging out at home. I had friends. We did role-playing games. We hung out. We went to the mall, that kind of stuff. And my dad said that my dad had started his own company with another Scientologist as a partner. And we had moved up to Santa Maria, California, which is outside of Santa Barbara. And so we were living up there now, and I was going to high school, and my dad said that another person at the company who was looking into Scientology was going to be going to the Santa Barbara church, the org. And would I like to go along to check it out for myself? Would I like to go see what this Scientology stuff is really all about? And since it came from my dad, I didn't really feel like I had the ability to say no. Beth. I was a little, whatever.
Sorry,
my
this is
dad.
not very stimulating.
And
I'm
again,
just-
not because he was ever physically
just
abusive
listening
or
to
weird
him
to
talk.
me. I just kind of had this deference to the things my dad wanted. So I went, I went down to the church. I fully expected, I took books with me. I took a backpack with games and stuff. I fully expected it was going to take me 10 minutes. I was going to blow it off and that was going to be it. Instead, I went in there and I did the personality test, the Oxford Capacity Analysis, this 200 questions of yes, no, maybe. And I got this graph telling me all about myself. And I had this woman sit down with me and interpret my graph and go over my graph with me. And she, I've told this story so many times, I'll just kind of cut to the chase and say that she convinced me that I was a shy, introverted 15-year-old. Which I was. And so she kind of nailed me on that. And I thought I had been keeping that a pretty closely held, guarded secret. And nobody really knew how shy and introverted I was when obviously everybody knew. And so she said, we have a class that you can take. It's a communications class. And if you take this class, you will not be shy and introverted anymore. And you will be able to get dates with girls. And I said, sign me up. Take my money, shut up and take my money, right? I couldn't sign up fast enough. And of course, let's remember that I went in there with this sort of surface attitude of, I'm going to brush this stuff off. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that I had been primed for this my whole life. So I didn't really go in there with a neutral attitude about Scientology. I'd had my friends ribbing me and giving me some shit about it. But I also had been raised with this stuff. So I had this idea that Scientology actually did work and actually was true. I just wasn't sure if I wanted to spend my time doing it while I was in high school when I was more interested in girls and stuff. So it was really a matter of more of priorities with me than it was a matter of I was critical of Scientology or I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I go in and I get convinced very quickly that I should be doing Scientology. And I then wanted to sign up for classes right away. And I ended up borrowing money from my parents. They would not pay for it themselves. They said, okay, well, if you're going to do it, we'll lend you the money, but you have to pay for it yourself. And I borrowed $900 from them so I could do 3 classes. And $900 to a kid in high school who's working at Burger King, that's a lot of money. But I was really convinced. I mean, it should kind of tell you how convinced I was, right? That this was like the shit. And I wanted it now because I wanted dates with girls, damn it. And I wanted to get along in life better.
Oh, I think this is messed up.
Being introverted. I didn't like being the guy who got picked on at school. I didn't like any of that. And this was a possible solution to all of it in one go with a class. I was like, God damn, absolutely, I want to do that. So I started doing classes at the Santa Barbara org, and I went with this guy who would drive me. His name was Doug, and he and I would go down and we worked together on the classes. And I did the communications. I did this very advanced communications class. I didn't do the entry level one. I ended up doing the big one. And then I did a study class where I learned sort of in a codified form all of that study stuff that I'd grown up with, learning to look up words and all the other aspects of Hubbard's ideas about how to study stuff. And I took a class on that basically surveyed the basics of Scientology because I didn't know all those basics. I hadn't read any of the books and stuff yet. I just knew what I had grown up with and what my parents had passed on to me. So I started taking these classes, started going back to school, started looking a little better. But communications wise, I learned how to look people in the eye and I learned how to talk to them and I learned how to listen to what they were saying. But it didn't really help me get any more dates. It didn't really help me overcome all the other cultural and social problems I was having. But I kind of convinced myself that it did because at least I was able to ask girls out now. They weren't saying yes, but at least I could ask, right? So I considered that a big momentous kind of gain, right? And this is the way that we sell ourselves on these groups is we're promised the sun, moon, and stars. We don't
Love
actually
random
get
messages
the
from
sun,
friends.
moon,
Just
and the
got a
stars,
what
but we
the
might
F
get
is this
something.
message
We
from my
might get a little
coworker friend
glimmer of
along with a lovely
sunlight. We
image of
might
a
get a
toilet
little
bowl. Holy
tinkling of a
crap.
starlight or something, right? You
No.
get my analogy. And we buy into that as an acceptable product of our work and our money and our time. And we continue going with it on the promise or the hope that the sun, moon, and stars will eventually manifest themselves. And that's how all these cults work, is they drag you in with these amazing promises, and they do give you something that you think is substantive and is very, very helpful to your life and changed your whole world. Well, the ability to go from not being able to look at girls to being able to ask them out, yeah, that was a good thing. But that was it. That was all I got for $900, right?
Right.
So, but I carried on because again, I was primed for this. I thought this was like the thing that was going to get me going. And of course, the other thing they tell you in Scientology, and they told me this many times, is that if the current service you did or that you're doing right now isn't handling the problem you're trying to handle, well, the solution's obvious. You just need to do the next service and the next one and the next one. And eventually, when you've done all the services, which are going to take you years to do,
And a lot of money.
$1 million when we're talking about Scientology, we're talking about a lot of money. Then you're going to have the sun, moon, and stars, you see.
So is
it's all
Scientology a pyramid scheme?
always dangling out there for you, always. And I, naively bought into it.
I guess it
and
can't
I kept
be
doing
because you're not
classes, and I
recruiting.
kept going down to the church on a fairly regular basis through the rest of my high school career. And when I was 17 years old, as a senior in high school, I finally graduated. And that summer, I was going to go to college. I was going to be a writer. I wanted to kind of follow in the footsteps of Stephen King, who was kind of one of my literary heroes. I loved his work, and I thought that I could do the same. I was a writer. I'd gotten myself into honors English classes in school. I'd gotten myself promoted into that program by writing stories and showing the teacher I was, literate and creative. I didn't pass the tests, the placement test to get me there, but I earned my way in there anyway. And I loved writing. I loved storytelling. And I thought that's what I was going to do with my life. And instead, I was going down to the church during the summer, and I was doing this purification sauna detox program that they do. And that's a whole another kettle of pseudoscience. But I was doing it. I was sweating out. I was spending 5 hours a day down at the church in Santa Barbara, driving down there every single day to do this detox program. And after I was done each day, they started wrangling me into an office and talking to me about working at the church. Because now that I wasn't going to high school anymore, I could potentially, leave home and start working at the church. And they had a personnel problem they had to solve, and they wanted me to help be the solution for that. And I thought, I don't know that I want to do that. And then they started showing me all these L. Ron Hubbard quotes about saving the world and how Scientology, they started introducing me to things that they told me were not broad, publicly known by all Scientologists, right? This was hidden information. This was confidential information. They were going to show me things that only staff members could see. The public don't get to see this, but you're special. And we're going to show you this. And they showed me writings from L. Ron Hubbard about how the world was going to, wasn't doing so good. And if Scientology didn't make it, the world wasn't going to make it. And we only had a few years. We were living on borrowed time. The oil crisis and the this crisis and that crisis. It was all just from people's reactive minds. And we must clear the planet, which means we have to get rid of the reactive minds. We have to get people freed up of all of their stresses and traumas and engrams.
This is awful.
And that was the reason.
Yeah.
I can't believe they did that to
that
him.
parallels Mormonism and Christianity's sort of end times focus. We're called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because of this teaching that the end is near. What humans don't realize is the predictions about the end of existence have been going on for millennia, but a way that an organization loops you in is by making you feel like the end is coming. There's a pending destruction, and you are the chosen person that can help save the planet, and it makes you feel special. It gives you a sense of purpose and meaning and
that makes
fulfillment.
sense.
And that's so often how they loop you in. The other thing I just wanted to say,
I think everyone
Chris,
wants to feel
is that,
special.
of course,
and
there's
that
part
they
of
can
me
make a
that's thinking,
difference.
man, it sounds like Scientology is just like self-help turned into a pseudoscience religion. And then I realized that's what you've just been telling us the whole time, that L. Ron Hubbard did Dianetics, which was self-help. And then he realized this could be much more effective without the purview of science and without government regulation. So let's take this self-help pseudoscience stuff, bake it into a religion, and then we'll be super financially and globally successful under those religious protections.
Exactly.
And without science inconveniently telling us that there's no empirical support for what we're actually saying, but it gets a youth like you hooked in, because who doesn't want to be better communicator? Who doesn't want to get rid of their insecurities? Who doesn't want to, get rid of anything that's an inadequacy so that they can be able to find love or find a date or make a family or be happy. And once the religion can convince you that you need them to be able to meet your life goals, then you're hooked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was how I got hooked, right? Because it went from the product of them working me over, and it took them days to do it. I was going down there every day. I was kind of a captive audience. I had to go to do this detox program. It was a daily thing. And coming out of the sauna after 5 hours, I was a little tired. And then they start working me over, and they start, doing this recruitment on me to get me to join staff. And there was clear, it was love bombing all over the place, because they kept telling me how great I was, how intelligent I was, how fit I was for working as a staff member, because not everybody is cut out to be a staff member, but you sure are. And I would suck all this stuff up. I mean, it was such an ego fest. I mean, it was awesome for somebody to sit there and, these wonderful people to tell you how wonderful you are, and these are the staff members who have been delivering services to me for the last couple of years. I respect these people. These are authority figures to me. And now they're telling me that I can be one of them, and not only be one of them, but how smart and brilliant I am, and how I'm part of the select few people who can be part of them, right? So I'm buying all of this. I'd never experienced anything like this before, and it felt wonderful. Then they're telling me that I'm going to be part of saving the world, and suddenly Scientology goes from something that I'm doing to improve myself to something that is absolutely necessary for the survival of our species.
That's kind of how it is when I'm
was
living too.
How they recruited me, right?
Yeah.
And so I had personal status going on, and I suddenly had this grim awareness of the world and how the world was going to hell, and I needed to do something about it. This was really, really key, because this put in my head some ideas that I held on to for decades, that made me make decisions that were very, very poor decisions for my life, right? Joining staff was the first one. After joining Scientology, I guess maybe it was the second one. But I went home, and I had to duke it out with my parents a little bit, because they had their own bad experience as Scientology staff members from their mission time. And they had to clear all that up. And I didn't really know a whole lot about it. All I knew is that suddenly they were really mad at me because I wanted to work at the church. They wanted me to do Scientology. They just didn't want me to work at the church, right? They didn't think I knew what I was doing. And you have to sign a 5-year contract of commitment. And the contract didn't promise me a whole lot of anything except free services, right? You get your services in Scientology for free as a staff member. You don't have to pay for them anymore. But they're going to pay you, next to nothing, right? They don't have to pay you anything. You sign up as a religious volunteer. I wasn't so keen. I wasn't so canny enough to be able to read a legal document and understand what I was actually getting into. And my parents tried to warn me, but I was 17 and I was done listening to my parents. So I just needed their signature on the dotted line, because I was a minor still. And they eventually relented, and I joined staff. This is after about 3 days of arguing and haggling back and forth.
And again, your parents didn't want you to join staff. Why?
Because they had been staff and they saw that
they
staff
got
were
screwed over,
abused and treated badly and not paid. And I mean, they saw behind the curtain of staff. They still, like I said, they still thought the subject of Scientology.
Yeah.
You know,
so and this is powerful. The organization can even mistreat you, but the theology can be so deeply embedded that you remain faithful to the ideology even after the organization has mistreated you.
That's right. And that had been the cycle that my parents had gone through.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to see me make those mistakes. They never, ever wanted me to be on staff.
But
I got recruited and I was going to save the world. And there is nothing more dangerous to the world at large than a young person who thinks he's saving it. And that was me at 17 years old, right? I was ready to go.
Yeah.
So I joined staff. I moved to Santa Barbara. I moved out of home. And I started, on this journey. And God, there's just a lot of details. And I really don't know. I don't know that we need to get into all the details of 8 years of my life.
She has a son a year younger than Ask with some of the same issues.
Well, it's
a different diagnosis.
Yes,
Few conversation on how one kid poops upward while the other poops sideways.
Which was given in cash, by the way, every week, was, maybe $50, $20, $18. A really great week of pay was $75 or $100.
And then how are you paying rent? How are you food?
I had to get another job. At first, my parents were basically supporting me. And for about the first year, they were helping me out. I got it. I was working full-time at the church. I had been sent to LA for training. So I was down there at the big blue buildings. I wasn't Sea Org yet. I was just a staff member. But one of the functions that happens in the Sea Org is they'll get staff from all the churches around and they'll train them on stuff. And I was getting trained to be a classroom supervisor to teach Scientology to other people, and sort of administer the classes. And so I went down to LA to do that. I bombed because I was kind of full of myself, and I didn't really understand staff and how staff worked and how the Sea Org worked, and that I was supposed to be subservient. And there was just a bunch of stuff I didn't really understand yet. And so I got sent back to Santa Barbara after 4 months, and I thought I had failed, and they were okay with it. They didn't care. They were like, okay, good. Well, you're back. Let's get you to work and let's get going. And I started working. And after a year, my parents said, look, you got to get a job, man. We can't keep supporting you and supplementing your income and stuff. You really got to take care of yourself. And I agreed. I said, okay, fine. And I was reluctant, but I did it. I tried to leave staff at one point, but they kind of convinced me to stay. And there's a principle in Scientology, especially that is run on staff hardcore, which is that if you want to leave, it's because of your own sins. It's what they call overts or overt acts, things you do that you wouldn't want somebody to do to you, right? Or things that you do that are destructive or harmful in some fashion. Even if that's just slacking off, it can be overt, or it can be, it can be an overt act, or it can be an act of omission, something you don't do that you should do, right? Either one of those can be, a violation of your moral code. And if you violate your own moral code often enough, then you'll want to leave the group because you're trying to protect the group from you, is the theory, right? You're such a bad person. So I'm making all these sacrifices and trying to make this go. And I ended up getting another job. So I'm working 80 hours a week now. 40 of those hours are pretty much unpaid. And the other 40 are just so I can have a job to have a roof over my head, get my own place. I'm struggling, back and forth with this because I'm conflicted, because I still believe I should be able to make money at the church. And the only reason we're not making enough money is because we're not working hard enough and getting the job done. It's not because there's something wrong with Scientology. It's never because there's something wrong with Scientology.
I'm super anxious, so I'm just...
Right? We're the ones who aren't fulfilling the potential. So for 8 years, I struggled with this. And I got a job after the first year. I basically maintained outside jobs, but they were always second fiddle, second priority to my Scientology work. That was the stuff that was saving the world. So that's where my focus and attention was on. And then let's see, lots of ups and downs, lots of, like I said, I tried to leave at one point, and they wrangled me back in, and actually a couple times I took off and tried to, say, look, this isn't for me anymore. But they would always kind of get you back in and, love bomb you and take care of you and treat you well and, and tell you, how needed you were. And
hey, Chris, let me ask you, it was 7 years you were working in that capacity?
8
years. Just without going into detail, what were the main responsibilities you had during those 8 years?
Okay, so first I was responsible for calling people in for the services that they had paid for. Sometimes people would come in, pay for classes, disappear, take off, not do them. So I was working on recovering them. Then I went back to LA the second time, and I succeeded in getting through the training to be a classroom supervisor. And I supervised classes for years, and I did some specialist training for that. Then I rose up. I got promoted to overseeing all of the class work and the counseling work for the church, right, for Santa Barbara. And I was sort of an executive type position, even though I was down, doing classroom supervising and stuff sometimes too.
I'm going to reinforce
And I sort of oversaw that delivery until 1995. And then that's when I joined the Sea organization.
Okay, so that was your 8 years.
Yep.
Okay, so, and this reminds me of the Landmark Forum a little bit. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but basically,
very much so.
Landmark Forum is an organization that brings people in on weekends and trains you for 2.5 days on, again, life improvement stuff. My sense is it's basically just warmed over secular Buddhism that then has a really almost culty feel to it in terms of how high pressured sales, the event is to try and close other people to attend the Landmark Forum. But one of the most stunning things about Landmark Forum is that they use former participants as volunteers to run the events. So the number of people running any given Landmark Forum event who are paid is actually relatively small, but you become such a believer in the method that you use all these volunteers to help you run the actual seminars. And so it just sounds like people who get recruited into Scientology as employees or as workers do so as volunteers to help promote the basic skills training that Scientology offers. Is that right?
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah. I mean, the staff are all basically volunteers. And we're not really getting paid a whole lot. But you're working on helping others go through the coursework, basically. Oh yeah, but it's more advanced than just helping them. There's special training for all of these jobs.
Yeah.
And so it's not just wrangling people in and saying, hey, can you help him get through his study, or can you sit with him and tutor him a little bit? It's much, much, much more formalized than that. My training took months to get through. Yeah. And I'm not saying the training was great. I'm just saying that it took me months to get through it because there's so much to learn about how to teach other people things according to L. Ron Hubbard.
But it's all about the infrastructure for the wealthier members or the members or the engagers who have access to financial resources. All the infrastructure is to help people move people through the
yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Got it.
And the level I was at as a Scientology staff member in Santa Barbara was the lowest or one of the lower levels of this infrastructure. And there is a hierarchical system. And when I joined the Sea organization, I was moving up that hierarchy.
And again, the hierarchy is it called the bridge? What's it called?
No, that's the organization structure is just the organization. The bridge to total freedom is the services that are also hierarchically arranged. Everybody does this service, and then everybody does this one, and then everybody does this one. It's a set series of services. There might be some individual variations in what you do with a person at one level or another, but they move up these levels of spiritual awareness and ability, and that is the bridge to total freedom. The organizational structure is how that bridge is delivered.
And are there explicit levels in the organization, like actual levels?
There are, and the levels involve basically, there's only really two of them. There's staff, and then there's Sea Org.
Okay.
And the staff deliver a certain block of services up to a certain level, and beyond that level, you need Sea Org members, and Sea Org members deliver the rest of the bridge.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's how it breaks down.
Okay.
And so as a staff member, we were only responsible for people up to the level of clear on the grade chart or the bridge. So we could deliver all of those services. All of that stuff is not confidential.
Yeah, I think it's 4 a.m.
Anybody
here
can go
too.
in, look at that stuff,
Damn.
read it. Look, there's nothing advanced about it. It's not the Xenu stuff.
This is a
that
good place to
done by the
stop
Sea Org.
because he's about to. There we go. That was the end of that episode. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'll show you how it updates as I go. This is the inside, so there's some mess ups on the mattress stitch. But I don't know how. I need to go back and look at my little sketch I made. So thanks for hanging out for so long, everybody. I hope you have a good night's sleep. I will catch you on the next live stream. Bye.